Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hopes for a breakthrough on NHS strikes as the government hints at a new pay offer.
Good morning, it's bright and early at 6 o'clock. It's Tuesday the 10th of January. Welcome to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, the Health Secretary is considering a pay offer to nurses that could see next week's strike action avoided. It's a significant shift for the government. The offer could take the form of a lump sum or backdated future pay for staff.
Prince Harry's 400-page memoir Spare, released today. In a new interview in the US, yes, another interview to promote the book, the Duke of Sussex said the late Queen was sad but not surprised by Brexit.
Britain is considering sending Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. It's the first time a Western country has hinted it will send its own heavy armour to the conflict and could spur even other countries to do the same.
And the first space launch from British soil failed to make orbit yesterday. The mission took off from Spaceport Cornwall but suffered what's being called an anomaly.
I think it was a bit more than an anomaly.
Yeah,
didn't go into orbit.
God, I bet
massive.
That's expensive.
All those people that work on that, and you think, man, this is the easy bit. You fly, you get it up there, and you just tip it out into space.
Is why I wouldn't want to do one of those space flights. Not only could you blow up on takeoff, but might fail in.
I would love to go to space, but only when it reaches the level of Star Trek. Right? So when you get on the bridge of the Enterprise, you get a viewing gallery, you look out there.
And you're the boss.
I can be Captain Kirk, I can sit down in a chair, and I'll say, warp factor 2, Mr. Spock. Whatever, just that would all be lovely. And transporters, where you press the button and you digitalise.
Yeah, perfect. Right, well, I'll see you there in a while. None of this budget.
All that cockpit business going up in a rocket and nonsense. No, none of that. None of that.
We'd love to hear from you. You fancy a bit of space travel? It could be a while before it happens from the UK. Let us know your thoughts. Also, we've got our hands on this copy. I know we've been talking about it relentlessly, but he's done another interview. More mud being slung. Let us know your thoughts.
That's not the most sensational thing. The most sensational thing is the price of this book, right?
28 quid. Cost of living crisis, people.
28 quid. I mean, there's not even any pictures in it.
That's the best bit. There's one on the back.
There's one on the back.
Really sweet. That was before he started mouthing off. Oh, look, hang on. Oh, no, there's no pictures. Literally not a single picture.
There's not a single picture. Why do you not believe anything I say?
I just doubt. I just doubt, you know.
What?
Just double-checking.
He just made that up.
Well, probably.
There are no pictures in that book, and you paid 28
well, we
quid
got that
for
one
it.
for free.
But if you wait for a month or so, you'll get it in a big bargain bucket in Tesco's at £1.
Well, actually, you don't even need to buy it. We'll tell you all the important bits in there.
We will. Anyway, back after this.
So let's start then with our top story. The Health Secretary reportedly considering a new pay offer to nurses in an attempt to avert strike action later this month.
In a potential major shift from the government, the offer could take the form of a lump sum or backdated future pay for NHS staff.
It's easy for you to say. Well, look, it follows yesterday's talks between the government and health unions, which the Royal College of Nursing described as bitterly disappointing. So a bit of mixed messaging there. Let's get more from the diary editor of The Spectator, James Heal. So look, Unison came out saying that there were constructive talks yesterday, and yet the RCN bitterly disappointed. The truth always is somewhere in the middle, probably.
Yes, it is. When we've been talking in the last few months or so, ministers have had this line that they can't intervene in these pay disputes, and that is between independent pay review bodies and the sectors involved. Now there seems to be a bit of a shift in rhetoric. I think both sides have kind of backed down from their previous positions, and now there does seem some willingness to kind of talk about how this might work. One form of discussion being talked about is the possible backdating pay from the start of the calendar year rather than the financial year in April. That would allow 3 months extra salary for people and nurses, etc. Or the other thing might be to talk about some kind of one-off payment system just to tide them over, given the financial challenges they're now facing.
I suppose all of that ties into, before Rishi Sunak was saying that they couldn't do these pay rises because it would be inflationary. Would this be a workaround for that?
Yes, it would. I mean, it depends what position you take on this. So the unions want to take the view that, look, our members are suffering now. We therefore want them to take with account of inflation when it's in double digits. The government wants to start from next financial year, when inflation is expected to be half to 5%. So therefore they will be working on calculations which would have put the level of inflation at less, and they'd have to pay less money. The truth is it'll be somewhere in the middle, probably.
Well, there never is the truth. So here's the truth. I'm going to speculate what the truth is, right? The truth is that Sunak says there's no crisis in the NHS. It's not on its knees or whatever. And then someone has said, Prime Minister, you better look at this file. If we have any more strikes, if we have any more disruption in the NHS, believe me, it ain't going to be here by the summer. And suddenly they become all conciliatory and they say, oh, funny, we've got more money and we've got more little goodies to tempt you with and whatever. So why do you think, James, I mean, call me a cynic if you want, but there is always a reason for offers being made. What's your reading?
I think that the polling's held up reasonably well in favour of the health workers and the unions. But I think also there is a kind of recognition of the hardship that's been going on, and I think that there was always going to be pressure to compromise. I mean, there were some MPs came out and said it in sort of November, December. Some were privately saying we should have settled before, that we should work towards a compromise because that was always the way things are going to go. I think that the unions have slightly shifted their position. The government has as well. And I think there's also the realisation that, the capacity is certainly needed, as we saw in yesterday's debate in the House of Commons as well.
And let's not forget ambulance staff still planning to strike tomorrow, and it doesn't look as though that's going to be allayed in any way.
Do you know what I'd do if I was funding ambulances? Get them proper vehicles. I have been in 4 ambulances over this year, right? Have you ever been in an ambulance?
I have, yes.
It's the most uncomfortable thing. So
in,
whatever's wrong with you, you're lying there. In my case, my back had gone or whatever, and you're lying there. There's no suspension. It's the cheapest sort of vehicle that you could get. So it's kitted out inside, absolutely horrendous. I hope it never happens to you. So that's what's happening in the health service, right? What about the real situation as well? If we're seeing a breakthrough here and things are getting better, are we any closer to solving this real dispute?
Yeah, I think that this is something the government's keen to sort of talk about, is do it by sector, because obviously some sectors have more support in their working strikers, whereas others don't. I think that there's some signs of that. I mean, you've seen Mick Lynch was in talks yesterday with the government, and there's a kind of willingness to talk around some of the conditions that were previously set out in pay deals, and they want to get all that in writing with the RMT and the Rail Development Group, which is what's dealing with these. So there is some sense that we're working towards a deal. I think that'd be the case, yes.
Talking of deals, details. A bit of movement in terms of Brexit, on data and progress with the Northern Ireland Protocol, potentially. Can you update us on that?
Yes, of course. Well, this is a story that's about data, and I think that it can be quite dry on the face of it, but there's hope, I think, in some quarters in London and Brussels as well, that this will be emblematic of a bigger sort of shift in the positions. Both sides are unofficially working towards the deadline of April, when, of course, it'll be the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and they want to see Stormont working again. And
President Biden is coming over for that, so I wonder if that's what's going to be focusing mind.
I think it certainly is, and the hope is that this is going to be something, you know, representative of a much bigger shift, and they want to show workings on both sides. The truth is, this is quite a dry issue, only one part of a much more complex series of negotiations, so I don't think we can get too excited ahead of ourselves, but it's certainly an encouraging sign.
OK, thanks, mate. Thank you very much. James Heal there. James is the diary editor with The Spectator. Always good to talk to you, James. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, Prince Harry's tell-all memoir, Spare, has finally been released. I'm trying to grab it for you there. It's got all the intimate details in it of his life and the ongoing feud with his family, making up its weighty 416 pages. And as Eamonn points out, no photographs in there. It's a lot of words.
There's a lot of something in it anyway. For details on the release and the fallout, let's go to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, who has this report.
Several secrets spill off the pages of the 416-page memoir from the Duke of Sussex. Today, it's placed on British bookshelves for the first time. Prince Harry, in his own words, describing what it was like growing up in what he sees as Prince William's shadow. The broadsides and claims paint the tragic story of a man who ultimately blames the press for what he sees as their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. In a promo interview, he branded the Queen Consort dangerous for forging connections with the British press to improve her image. In the book, Harry even accused his own brother, William, the heir, of physically attacking him. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not commented on Prince Harry's allegations. Friends of Prince William reportedly told the Sunday Times he's keeping a dignified silence for the sake of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales wants to keep the spotlight firmly on his charity work and avoid distracting headlines. And the late Queen's motto of never complain, never explain appears to be working for the firm. Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK according to the latest YouGov poll, following his claims that the royal family briefed the press to make him and his wife Meghan look like villains. Prince Harry chose to include some deeply personal stories like how he lost his virginity, but touched on more serious topics, claiming he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his second tour of Afghanistan when he was serving as a British soldier. Several former soldiers are worried Prince Harry's claim will make him, his family, and the British Army more of a target for terrorism. The Prince also describes how he turns to drink and drugs to cope with his mental health struggles, and writes about a private conversation he once had with his father, now the King. Prince Harry says he wants reconciliation with his brother and father, whose coronation is just months away. But the rift runs deep in the House of Windsor, and it's understood both sides wants the other to accept some responsibility. Cameron Walker, GB News.
You see, I genuinely scratch my head about this. I mean, the more we know about this book, does that make you want to buy it, or do you actually think, heard it all, fed up with this now?
Well, do you know, I can't remember which paper it was this morning, and they stole your exact line about people watching Happy Valley yesterday instead of watching the interview.
I can bring you...
There you go, it was the Metro. Two-thirds disapprove of Harry, more watched Happy Valley. Their headline, Britain has had enough, with the play on has.
Ah, yeah.
So great minds.
Well, funny about that, the Happy Valley situation, the official figures are, I think, Unhappy Harry got about 4 million and Happy Valley got 5.85 or something.
Sort of figures of days of olden.
Do you watch Happy Valley?
No.
It's very good.
I don't watch TV.
Do you know why it's called Happy Valley?
Because it's all about a really grisly rape story?
It is about that. But
I'm very happy to
It's called Happy Valley because there's a big drugs use in the area.
Oh, right, so they're all off their faces.
Yeah.
Lovely.
That's right.
Well, another link with Prince Harry.
Anyway, are we going to Los Angeles now? Kinsey Schofield here because he's done about 1 million interviews on all of this, and she's going to bring us up to date about the latest ones that are going on in America. Hi, Kinsey.
Oh, Isabel, your little quip right there made me giggle.
I know, it just came out. Just
Naughty.
came out my mouth. Naughty, I know, but you know what? He's writing about drugs and all the rest of it in there, and then Eamonn's talking about Happy Valley. I see a link. I say it as I see it. But tell us,
and how weird that he's talking about all these drugs and talking about using alcohol to cope, and then he's going on Stephen Colbert, the late night show, and doing shots.
Yeah.
I would not be doing that. I would think, oh, I'm trying to look like I've cleaned up my image and I'm a new man. But no, don't worry. Just do the tequila shots.
I'm not the naughty one. But what's he been saying to Michael Strachan on Good Morning America? Because this is the latest breakfast news interview he's given.
Well, he said he had compassion for Camilla, but also said that Camilla specifically was one of the people that leaked stories about him and Meghan to elevate herself, which, I mean, I'm telling you, I really don't believe that that's true. I'm really surprised that he would be so bold to make those claims. I know that there was a rehabilitation that happened in the 90s, but everybody loves Camilla now, Isabel and Eamon. You know this. She's funny. She's got a great personality. She doesn't need to be leaking stories. That's just not. It's not a necessity anymore.
There was a stage where she did need to rehabilitate her image in the eyes of the British public. And although Meghan thinks she's the only one that's ever had a bad review in the newspapers, I mean, it was pretty nightmarish for Camilla. So it's not that I can't see the sense of what he's talking about, but the hypocrisy gets me. It's as if has St. Meghan and him never leaked a story to the press? You know, so it's dog eat dog, isn't it?
A book full of stories.
Exactly. We've got an entire book full of stories. People magazine, who Harry is giving an exclusive interview to this week, that I was surprised to discover that. Remember when her friends went to People magazine to talk on her behalf about her father and that letter that her father had. Oh, also, Isabel, are you seeing these text messages? Yes. Harry goes text by text, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and Meghan. Isabel, can you tell me what is the difference between leaking an entire text conversation between the Princess of Wales and Meghan and Thomas Markle giving portions of a letter to a newspaper?
Yes, exactly. No, and the Daily Mail has serialised the entire exchange. Extraordinary access, the sort of access that people were hauled over the coals for in the UK in the Leveson inquiry when they were, you know, tapping into people's phones. Don't need to do that anymore. You can rely on Harry and Meghan just to publish them of their own free will. And this was Kate saying, Charlotte's dress is too big, too long, too baggy. She cried when she tried it at home. Meghan replied, right. And I told you the tailor's been standing by since 8 a.m. here at KP, Kensington Palace. Can you take Charlotte to have it altered as the other mums are doing? Kate replied saying, no, all the dresses need to be remade. And the wedding is in 4 days. Meghan replies, yes, Kate, I know. ...
I mean, also, how petty is this? I don't care. I mean, I really don't care. I'd be upset if we had 4 days to go and my little girl didn't have an outfit too. And I don't understand why this is something that you would include in a book. I think it's absolutely insane. And I just think he makes himself look this big, this big.
He also said in this interview, go on.
Oh, I was going to say, but he's continued to talk, he's continued to speak, and it really looks like in the States he's going after Camilla much more than he did Prince William, which is what I saw with the ITV interview. But with Anderson Cooper and with ABC, it's very negative towards Camilla.
Interesting. I was reading as well in the paper this morning that there were comments in one of these interviews by Harry about the royal children and concerns for their safety, and that Buckingham Palace's lawyers called up ABC whilst it was going out on air and said, we need this in a full transcript so that we can respond appropriately, and we need the context for all of this. And I believe that's not the first time Buckingham Palace's lawyers have been instructed to move like that. So they are clearly working behind the scenes to try and shore up their position, which is, I think, really interesting.
He also says, and one of the reasons why we're hearing the attorneys wanted to talk to them is that the Queen was not in the position to help him the way she wanted to. Trying to, again, Isabel, for years we've heard him try to act as if he has a closer relationship to the Queen than we're privy to, even though he did all of these, he actively did these things to hurt the institution, which she was the head of. So yes, attorneys have contacted asking for a transcript because he said he feels like the children are in jeopardy, and if he has his way and he can pursue all of this litigation, he'll make it a better world for them. our martyr, Prince Harry.
Kinsey, I follow you on Instagram, as you know. Why have you got a load of wolves in your back garden? Or she's got like...
That was her parents' house over Christmas. I follow her too.
Tell us, if you go on to Kinsey's Instagram page, she's got all these sort of like hyenas and things in her back garden.
I thought she was on safari.
They're coyotes and they're javelina. And Eamonn, you love your little dogs the same way I do. They stay in the guest room. The dogs don't. I got to keep the dogs up because there's coyotes and javelina everywhere. It was in Arizona.
Wow.
So they would eat. They would eat your dogs.
Yes, they would.
What's a javelina?
It's like the cutest little piglet, Isabel. I'm going to send you some pictures.
Okay, perfect.
A javelina.
A javelino. Sounds very exotic. I love it.
Nice.
Kinsey, we cover all the topics of the day with you. I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for syncing with the pink as well. Great minds.
Thank you. See, at least
absolutely.
Pictures come with her. There's no pictures in his 28 quid book. What's 28 pounds in dollars, Kinsey? Oh, she's gone. She's gone.
We'll look it up.
Money's run out in the meter there. 18 minutes past 6 o'clock. The day's top stories shape up like this.
School pupils in Scotland will miss their lessons this week after last-minute talks between the government and the teaching unions failed to stop new strikes. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are demanding 10%.
Britain is considering supplying Ukrainian forces with British tanks for the first time since the start of the war. Defence officials say talks are ongoing about possible supply of Challenger 2 tanks. Downing Street says it's important that other NATO members will follow suit.
Electric vehicle drivers have to pay more to charge their batteries on long journeys than those who pay for fuel. An RAC report shows drivers pay around 20p per mile for their electricity when using the charges, which is caused by rising costs of gas and electricity.
$34.
That's £28, is it?
Yeah. $34 for a book that we know what's in it.
Yeah, it's all been leaked.
And it has no pictures. Oh, what about Cornwall, Newquay last night and all that sort of thing.
Squib.
So everybody's heralding this space launch yesterday, and where the big jet, whatever it was, a 757 or whatever, was taking a rocket up into space and putting it into orbit, except it didn't. They went out. I don't know, what was everybody gathering in Newquay for? The plane took off, went out into the middle of the Atlantic, an hour and a half, and then let it... So why are you standing watching an airplane take off in Newquay at 11 o'clock last night?
It was momentous.
Yeah, it was momentous that it failed, completely failed. Let's go to a bit of a damp squib. Our Southwest of England reporter Jeff Moody with the whole story.
They came by the busload, eager to witness history.
Once in a lifetime thing. It might not happen again in our lifetime, so thought we'd come and see it.
Very exciting.
This means so much to the Cornish, a fledgling space industry that's set to earn the duchy £250 million a year. Jobs, opportunities, the sky's the limit. Spaceport Newquay has waited months for a flight window, a time when conditions are just right. Back down on Earth, the drinks flowed, the party started. But then, Newquay, we have a problem.
It appears that Launcher 1 has suffered an anomaly which will prevent us from making orbit for this mission. We are looking at the information and data that we have gotten.
It's now 5 to midnight, and there's been a real party atmosphere here at Newquay. But the plane is just coming into land now. And we've heard that there's been an anomaly and the mission hasn't succeeded. The atmosphere here has suddenly changed.
Well, I don't know what went wrong technically. Everything seemed to be going perfectly well. You know, the plane took off, the rocket left the plane as planned, and then something in that final phase of getting the rocket into the right orbit has clearly gone wrong, which meant the satellites couldn't be released. I mean, hugely disappointing. But I still think an awful lot for us to be positive about from Spaceport Cornwall's point of view tonight.
As the news filtered through, people drifted away. It wasn't the evening they hoped for. It's not what Spaceport Cornwall hoped for either.
Yes, it made the wrong orbit. So if you think about going round the Earth, it will be kind of its height. So it will have reached a limited height into space. But effectively, that second stage burn was trying to get it to about 500 kilometres above the Earth. That didn't happen. So we need to work out what happened and why that was the case.
Yeah, awful. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie. It was just like, it was gutting. We all heard at different times. So once we kind of all got together, there were tears, and it was very upsetting.
It's not the end. Space missions sometimes fail, and with each failure they learn, they adapt, they try again. But no one doubts the ferocity of this blow. The team will now rest, regroup, and reach for the stars again. Jeff Moody, GB News.
So an anomaly, I can't even say that. Anomaly occurred. Please give us another word for anomaly.
Something unexpected occurred.
I have a word, but they're all rude.
Yeah, that sounds
So it was
about
a
right.
Well, why don't you say it was a Horlicks, wasn't it?
A Horlicks,
It was a complete
a
Horlicks.
Yes.
Yes. They flew into a storm.
Yeah, well, they have to have a scientific word.
An anomaly. It was just a stupid word. What went wrong? It was a disaster. It was...
An aberration.
I know what I'd call it, but anyway. So if you've got another word for anomaly. Anyway, we'll take a break and we're going to talk. What supermarket do you use? We're talking about the war between Lidl and Aldi and who's come out on top.
Is that what you call it?
What do you call it? I've never been in one. Aldi.
You call it Aldi?
Wait a minute, Aldi.
Like for the oldies. Aldi. Sorry,
Aldi.
it's not the important.
Is it not Aldi?
I thought it was Aldi.
Do you say Audi or Audi?
Audi.
Audi.
What do you say?
Audi.
You're driving an Audi?
Yeah.
An Audi. Oh, for goodness sake. Right, here's the weather.
Renault or Renault?
Renault.
Good morning, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Bit of a wet one today. Heavy rain has been moving in through the night, blustery as well, but it's not as cold as it was at this time yesterday. Here's the culprit. Well, actually, it's this area of low pressure, but these weather fronts tied into it are bringing the wet and windy but milder weather. Still a fairly cold start over parts of northeast England and northeast Scotland. The rain yet to arrive over northern Scotland, but elsewhere it's moving in. Heavy and persistent for parts of northwest England and Wales. We have Met Office yellow warnings in place here because it's been so wet recently. This extra rain could cause some issues. The rain slowly heading away, and parts of eastern England will turn a bit drier this afternoon, but damp and drizzly in southern England. The rain always fairly heavy across parts of Wales and northwest England. It is going to be mild, obviously not feeling all that mild across northern Scotland, single figures here. Elsewhere 10 to maybe 14 Celsius, but don't forget it's also going to be blustery. Gusty winds for Wales and western England as this weather system then sweeps its way eastwards through this evening and overnight. As that clears, we'll then see showers moving into western parts during the early hours. And it will be a cooler night for many, certainly across the south, but temperatures still in most places staying above freezing. The strength of the wind helping to prevent too much of a frost. On to Wednesday, and we're basically back to sunshine and showers tomorrow. Plenty of sunny spells over eastern England and eastern Scotland. Not too many showers here, certainly not tomorrow morning, but we will see lots of showers further west, heavy showers, and just zipping in on a fairly strong and gusty wind. A bit of snow over the Scottish mountains. And I say further south, the showers will be pretty heavy at times. Temperatures back down again, closer to average 7 to 10 Celsius, and again feeling cooler with the winds and when the showers come along. The weather just chopping and changing throughout this week. Showers tomorrow, more persistent rain again on Thursday from these weather systems, and then we're back to blustery showers on Friday.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Time fast approaching 6:30. Still to come this morning. At 10 to 7, we're going to be speaking to the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, as the government hints at an offer to nurses that could see the strikes postponed.
And just after 7, Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl will be here, giving us her take on Harry's memoir Spare, which hits bookshelves today. Will you be buying one?
Your views, get in touch with us. You know what to do. gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News. If you're looking for a cheap supermarket, Aldi has been named the UK's cheapest for 2022, according to the consumer group Which.
Yes, the budget supermarket was crowned the lowest priced for 7 consecutive months, narrowly beating its rival Lidl.
OK, we're joined now by consumer rights expert. Here's Martin James for more on this. Martin, good to see you. Lidl, Aldi, what's the difference? How deep is the rivalry?
Good morning, Eamonn. Well, the difference when you actually look at the information that's been very thoroughly researched by Which is not very much. Now, there is that fierce supermarket rivalry that we often hear about, but actually there's only a pound or two in between Aldi and Lidl, who are now the UK's leading discount supermarkets. So lots to celebrate for Aldi, but when you actually look at the details for you and me and the pound in our pocket and how much the supermarket shop is going to cost us, it's a little bit, the news isn't fantastic, to be honest, and that's not really going to come as a surprise to anyone, given the cost of living crisis.
But I suppose that makes it all the more important, doesn't it? As we're all seeing our shopping baskets increase in price, trying to find out the one where that penny stretches a little bit further, absolutely key. And to see that rivalry between Aldi and Lidl actually shifted during the peak or the start of the cost of living crisis, really interesting as well, at the beginning of the year.
Yes, absolutely. There's always been this battle between the supermarkets, and we've often heard about this. But what we're seeing now, and actually what Which is doing is really interesting with this data, is it's looking at thousands of products, a little bit like those price comparisons that we always talk about around Black Friday. Anyone can go onto the Which site and have a look at kind of how much prices have fluctuated over the last year. Now, what Which are doing is they're comparing to a point a year ago. So the latest data is looking at December 2022 versus 21. Now, you don't need me to tell you that an awful lot has happened in the past year, and that's had a huge impact. And one of the things in this data that's actually really interesting is the fact that the biggest kind of rise in terms of the different types of goods that the shops have is amongst own brand goods. These are the goods that we know consumers have been buying because money's getting really, really tight. And actually, that's where we're seeing the biggest inflationary price rises. Now, without being too boring, what that's telling us about what's going on behind the scenes is the fact that actually the raw cost of actually making goods, of producing them and getting them into supermarkets is going up. And even the supermarkets can't cut into that too much without affecting their bottom line.
I have a conflict in all of this because every time I hear that the supermarkets are cutting prices and whatever, I think of producers and I think of farmers in particular, and I think that the money's got to come from somewhere, and usually it comes from the people who do all the hard work at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Eamonn. I'm actually really glad that you raised that, because I was chatting to a journalist about this information yesterday, and they were saying, well, should supermarkets be doing more to cut money? And actually, the Which campaign has a whole range of recommendations that make a lot of sense, like doing targeted reductions for areas where demographically people are struggling a little bit more. But realistically, I spent years talking to producers of milk, for example, who've had their bottom line cut into so much that it wasn't actually worth them carrying on with their own business. Now, what we need in this day and age is to support our smaller and medium-sized businesses that are the lifeblood of this country. We've all suddenly woken up to how important it is for our homegrown produce and things produced in the UK. If these businesses don't survive, and they've already had some bad news with the reduction of the support in energy, which was announced yesterday as well, then we're simply going to be reliant on imports, and that means prices are going to increase. So yes, support your local suppliers. And actually, if you feel like cutting out the supermarkets, have a look at what's available in your local area. Most of us are within 10 miles of a farm or a producer of some fresh goods. Get acquainted with them and see if you can get some bargains that way.
Well, good luck in doing that, because the cost of production, I mean, they can't subsidise their product the way the supermarkets can. My esteemed colleague beside me here, she took out a hard-boiled egg yesterday during the programme and peeled it. And as she bit into it...
Don't go anywhere without my egg.
And as she bit into it, it was amazing to see, because the inside... Martin, what should the colour of the inside of this egg be?
Well, you see, I'm a northerner, so I was brought up with free-range eggs from down the road, and it should be a nice kind of orange golden.
And that's what it is. That's what it is. She has a healthy, really top-end orange egg in there. So, that's lovely to see, and it ties into what you're saying about getting local produce and whatever. But when we get to the big boys and girls in terms of the supermarkets, the Tesco's, the Sainsbury's, the Asda's and whatever, how are these guys shaping up, or is it just all Aldi and Lidl?
Well, actually, again, that's a really, really good point, because, of course, as many of the supermarkets have rushed to say about this data and the previous data that Which has released, it's not necessarily a level playing field. And that's quite right, because a lot of the traditional supermarkets, as we're calling them, carry all kinds of different brands as well. Aldi, of course, focuses on its own brands. Lidl does a lot of sourcing locally just under its name. So actually, with big brands, again, there's not much of a difference. What Which does here is it looks at a much bigger shopping basket to get a good idea of the spread of things. So there are some brand names in there, and there's some own brand stuff. Now, in the most recent data that came out previously, it was Asda that came out on top. But again, this fluctuates quite a bit. Won't be a surprise for anyone to discover that Waitrose is usually the most expensive, but then that's how it markets itself anyway.
All right, listen, we have to leave it there.
Not very little, certainly.
All right, sorry to interrupt you. We are out of time. Martin James, consumer rights expert, thank you very much for taking us through all of that.
Yeah, very interesting talking to you, Martin. We'll get you back on and we'll talk more in depth maybe later in the month. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Right, we're going to take a break. Martin Dabney and Amy Cameron will be back with that in just a sec.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Let's bring you up to date with the front pages on this Tuesday morning.
Here's The Sun. It's leading with villain Camilla as Prince Harry goes after the Queen Consort, accusing her of ruthlessly seeking out the crown.
The Guardian leads with the NHS strikes, unions blaming ministers for failed talks. New pay offer could be on the horizon, talking to that with the business secretary in about 10 minutes' time.
The Telegraph says UK tanks could be on their way to the Ukraine. We'd be leading the West if that happens.
Financial Times focuses on a deal between Britain and the EU which may finally settle the Northern Ireland trade agreements. Martin Dabney here in the studio with us today, not doing my job, and thank you for doing it, Martin.
Keeping it warm for you, Eamonn, keeping it warm.
Keeping it warm, thank you. And Amy Cameron reviewing the newspapers. Very nice to see you, Amy, as well. Guys, I suppose we've got to start with Prince Harry and your various takes on this. I just sort of feel everything's been said on this. But anyway, Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're right in a sense. We're milking this one dry, but the book came out, so let's do it once more with emotion. The stuff about Camilla, I think, is particularly damaging for the future of the family. Looking back on the past is one thing, but this idea that there was a press conspiracy against him with endless leaks has been one of his main driving forces for wreaking this foul revenge. And it turns out here he's squarely putting the blame on Camilla for that, saying she was the villain, she left bodies in the street. You know, the sort of words he might have used about his Afghanistan tour. And here he is talking about her leaving bodies in the street. In an attempt to rehabilitate her image and help to get her favour to be seen favourably within the royal family in the wake of the death of Diana. It's a horrible, horrible thing to say. I think it's incredibly damaging. I think, you know, it's just high time now. He just zipped his lip and just cleared off back to America.
Zipped his lip, Amy.
Yeah, leave these shores alone.
I read yesterday someone saying he's like an influencer you can't unfollow, which pretty much sort of sums it up, I think. I think that the situation with Harry for me is that two things can be true at the same time, right? So lots of the things that he's saying about the British press are true. The British press is brutal. It can be incredibly hypocritical. It's got major elements of misogyny, racism, etc. You can believe all of those things and also just want to break from all of this. I mean, at this point, I think we can sort of slightly give up on Harry being the front line of wokery or whatever it is you want to call him. This is just a family feud at this point that we're all being forced to endure. I think the Camilla thing for me is interesting because at this point she's tipping over into sort of high camp glamour, evil stepmother vibe. I don't know that it's bad for her in the long run, but
they worked so hard to
rehabilitate
her reputation.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was the Queen's sincerest wish that she would be known as Queen Consort when she died. There wasn't a single, really, voice when the Queen died, the late Queen died, of dismay about her becoming the Queen Consort. So accepted is she now. Yeah. And to see The Sun this morning with the villain Camilla on their front page, it is harking back to the days of Diana. Huge step backwards. And you can only imagine the King will be devastated by that.
Yeah, that's the issue, really. It's on the one hand, you know, he moans moans left, right and centre about the press being weaponised against Meghan, and now he is weaponising the press against Camilla.
Well,
it's the same sin.
If you look at the front page of the Metro, which you've chosen here, Harry's popularity in all of this has hit an all-time low.
Yeah, so I think in the kind of bigger context of this, your point is exactly right around what are the long-term implications of all of this for the royal family. And if I were the royal family, if I were advising the royal family, incredibly unlikely state of affairs, at the moment we still have a country that is majority in support of the royal family, but that support drops off dramatically as you move down into younger generations. And Harry and William, etc., they represent the future face of the monarchy, right, whether you like them or not. If I were the monarchy, I would be starting to think about how we put in place reforms that ensure we maintain that decreasing level of support. Because I think there is a long-term question for them here. As the monarchy turns into more of a just sort of celebrity sideshow, what does that mean for the amount of...
I don't think that's fair or represents what the majority of Britain thinks at all. And in fact, young people, millennials, they're meant to be his home crowd. We were talking about last week, popularity amongst 18 to 24-year-olds is plummeting for Meghan and Harry.
But it's also incredibly low for the family.
This uncivilised riffraff that they're bringing.
I'm not disagreeing with you in that, like, it is true that at the moment there is majority support for the royal family. That's the situation. I don't think the royal family should exist, but it does, and it will continue to. But I think we do need to have a serious conversation about the size of the family, about the amount of property that they own and the profits they accrue from that, about their role as head of state on an international level. We're not at the point in this country about talking about abolishing the monarchy, but we are at the point, I think, of asking some quite hard questions about their role in the wake of all of this.
Chucking mud, it devalues the monarchy in some way, doesn't it? Because
it
shows all the dirty laundry in public and all those.
Or we could agree that there's a huge place for the monarchy and the future looks bright, and the only reason we're having a negative conversation about it is because of Harry, who just clear off and leave the rest of the royal family. William and Kate have been so civilised. That's what we want to see.
But even putting that, like, that's, I think the popularity of the monarchy was already low among younger generations even before this. No, it's just the polling among age, right? Like, I'm putting aside my personal opinions on it. You can just see it tracks down as people get younger, and they do need to be thinking smart about what their role is and how they bring the public along with them if they want to retain a relevance.
People probably start to appreciate the country more and become more conservative.
That's the polling is showing that's not happening, right? Millennials are more left than they were when they were young.
How they'll think in 20 years' time.
No, but the trend is shifting, isn't it? Anyway, that's another debate.
We've talked a lot about Harry over the last few days, as you can imagine. Let's turn our attention to another really important issue. This is on the front of the Times. Cabins in car parks to help an overloaded NHS. Not a good look. One wonders if these sorts of optics are what has prompted what appears to be a bit of a shift in the position.
Oh, that's been going on for years.
Yeah, exactly.
You go around any hospital or dental surgery or NHS, whatever, and they've got porta cabins everywhere.
So I live near King's Hospital. It's where my daughter was born. It's an amazing hospital. I drove in this morning past King's, and there are porta cabins outside King's for things like MRI scans, breast cancer scans, blood tests. It's quite a routine part of NHS capacity. So on the one hand, it's like, oh my God, they're in sheds. They're not. They're high-tech porta cabins, and they are there to aid capacity. It's, I think, a good and sensible plan, and it's quick and it's cheap. They can be dropped in quickly. They don't cost anywhere near as much as expanding a wing.
I mean, my GP surgery in Belfast is in a porta cabin, or a few of them linked together. It all looks brilliant inside. And in Surrey as well, it's exactly the same. They're in porta cabins.
So Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary, is pumping 50 million quid into this to temporarily allow for expansion. We talked last week. Other sensible ideas might be to pay 65,000 care workers as a shortage. There are £9.50 an hour, less than Aldi workers. At £1 an hour, they're leaving that job to go and stack shelves in supermarkets. There are, I think, cheap, cost-effective ways to help the NHS, and I think porta cabins in car parks is one of them. I think it's a good thing, Eamonn.
OK, just a quick word. We've got the Business Secretary coming up very, very shortly. There may be a shift towards settling this whole NHS crisis, which the Prime Minister does not accept that there is a crisis. There is a crisis.
Yeah, clearly.
What would you like to say just in terms of that?
I think everyone wants to have optimism, right? The fact that they are talking about pay is hopefully a sign for hope. I think the concern is that what is where they go from here. What you don't want to see is a sort of war of attrition between the unions and the government where they dangle hope only to snatch it away again in the hope that gradually the public lose support.
OK, guys, you're going to be back right after the break. And as we say, very shortly, we're going to be speaking to Grant Shapps, the Business Secretary, right after this. Great.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing. You see, amazing. You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
So here we are, we're going through the papers and we're listening to Martin Dabney and Amy Cameron droning on.
Such a pleasure to have you back, Eamonn.
Financial Times, Martin. So here's a lot of old nonsense as well about the Northern Irish Protocol.
Yes.
And we're expected to believe this is all going to be a big breakthrough. Believe me, we'll still be talking about this in a year's time. This is technically very, very complex. What are they proposing here?
So when those of us who sacrifice our careers to go to Brussels to try and get Brexit done walked into it, all of us understood very quickly that the Northern Ireland Protocol was the most complicated part of the entire unpicking of the
Boris
UK.
Johnson didn't see it that way,
Boris
did he?
Johnson, as well as selling our fishermen down the river, as well as binding us to European laws in perpetuity, also totally abandoned Northern Ireland by putting a hard border down the Irish Sea.
Yeah.
He created a problem which still hasn't been resolved. James Cleverly, however, is saying there has been a slight breakthrough with Stefanovic, who's the European Commission Vice President, because they've agreed to share data. Well, whoopee. Well, that will sort it all out then, won't it? So they can share...
But goodness me, this is so complicated.
Yeah.
You know, this is... I was looking at something about this last night, and, where a product emanates from, how it's sourced, where it goes, who's handled it, where it's going to end up. Dear God.
And part of the baking in of the EU's protocol into the new British way was they were not allowing us to use data on things like criminals coming into Britain, so Europol, all that. Well, you're not allowed that because you're not in the EU. But part of our thing was data about trading, about goods and their origin, which they come to some agreement of. However, the real story is what happens next. Because if Keir Starmer gets in at the next election, as well as repealing strike laws, I think he'll be unpicking some of this and being more favourable towards Brussels.
Well, he's heavily denied that and claimed, and it's political suicide, as we all know. But what I think is really interesting about this Brexit story is it appears as though this President Biden visit to mark the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement will really focus minds. Who'd have thought it would take President of the United States to potentially sort this out? You're sceptical, Eamonn, and you think we'll still be in this mess in a year's time. But
Oh, definitely.
who knows?
The practicalities of this are impossible.
Yeah.
And, Biden does all this, fiddly-dee business that he's Irish and whatever, and, harping on to his roots and whatever. But he doesn't have to deal with the practicalities of all of this.
Yeah.
We're going to take a pause from the papers to say thank you to Amy and Martin for now, because we are joined by the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us bright and early. Look, it feels as though a bit of a shift, certainly yesterday, in some of the mood music coming out of Downing Street in relation to these talks with certainly NHS unions. Can we see a breakthrough? Can we see those strikes being averted next week for nurses, even though the RCN said they were bitterly disappointed? Is there going to be some movement?
Yeah, and Unison said that they thought that some progress had been made. But look, everybody wants this to come to a conclusion. It's in the interest of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole. And people like nurses do a terrific job and did through COVID, which is why they were the only ones to get a pay rise in the public sector last year with COVID. And we hope that we can find a way forward, a settlement. But today in Parliament behind us, I'll be introducing a minimum safety level, service level bill, which will sort of say, look, we will never withdraw the right to strike from people, but when there are strikes on, life and limb must come first, and there has to be a minimum safety standard put in place for that.
Take at least 6 months before that gets through, and yet tomorrow ambulance workers and paramedics will be going on strike, and a lot of people will see that as a failure on the part of the government to stop that from going ahead.
Well, first of all, just in terms of timetable, I don't think the legislation will take as much as 6 months. But actually, I should say, we don't really ever want to have to use that legislation. In those most recent strikes, the Royal College of Nursing, the nurses, agreed a set national level of support. Unfortunately, we couldn't get there with ambulances across the country, meaning there was a bit of a postcode lottery as to whether an ambulance would turn up in the case of something serious like a heart attack or a stroke. And we can't have that, so common sense tells us that we need to have minimum safety levels, which is what I'll introduce. But I just want to also remind everyone, the government has accepted in full the independent pay review body's recommendations for pay. So we're the ones who've actually accepted it. Obviously, it takes two to tango, and that's why these talks are going on.
Set before inflation went up and the cost of living crisis.
You're still, Secretary of State, prepared now to go further. I mean, the soundings that we're hearing today is that there's going to be more on the table. Why the sudden shift? Why is the government becoming suddenly more generous with all of this?
Yeah, I should say on those independent pay review bodies that they took into account inflation and projected inflation in reaching those numbers. And it's right, it's done independently of government. That's fair. Of course, there's a cost to everyone of pay rises, whether it's on, to railway workers or train drivers or people in the NHS. The rest of society obviously has to pick up the bill for that, and it's a question of getting that balance right. And then in terms of, your question about sort of why now, well, a lot of these strikes, particularly on transport, have been running for a very long time, and they've sort of turned into almost forever strikes, and we want to constructively work to bring that to an end if we possibly can. It's a new year, and so we're trying to encourage everybody to the table to see if we can't find solutions, and that's the big push from the government's point of view. As I say, I think it's important that we bring these strikes to a close. We're looking at inflation rates, I think, peaking and coming down this year, according to the Bank of England. And so, we want to get on with making sure there are public services there for all of us.
Yeah, a lot of this is not just about money on offer. I mean, when we look at the Royal Mail, and when we look at the train transport situation there, these people are worried about their jobs. They're worried about job security going into the future. If you were giving a message to Royal Mail workers, posties, and people who are working on the trains, and they're collecting tickets and whatever they're doing on trains, would you be advising them to go and get new jobs in the next year or so?
No, that wouldn't be my advice. But actually, you pick a couple of interesting sectors of the economy because they've obviously changed radically. I mean, people don't send letters like they used to in the past, but there is a big and growing parcel business. And on the trains, people don't use tickets like they did in the past. You don't need people collecting tickets in the same way. A lot of that's turning contactless. A lot of it's barcodes.
You would be advising them to go and get new jobs.
The shape of the No, I wouldn't. But what does mean that can happen now is that people can be used more flexibly. For example, get rid of some of these working practices which really belong in the arc. You know, you've had really, particularly on the railways, which I know a lot about. You've got some of these working practices which go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, which could be modernised and actually modernise the safety of our railways as well. But there's been a lot of objection to making those kind of changes. But therein lies the solution, because if you can modernise, you can also pay people better in return for that improvement in productivity, and that's one of the things that clearly makes a lot of sense.
Grant, you worked under Boris Johnson in the cabinet with him. He's making a speech at the Carlton Club tonight. Don't know if you'll be attending. Lots of people talking about whether or not he might be planning a bit of a comeback. Certainly feels, does it not, as though the Sunak bounce hasn't materialised, as poll ratings haven't shifted at all since he became Prime Minister. And the speech last week, not perhaps as big a success as he might have hoped.
Well, look, politics is a longer-term sort of programme than that. And we've got a programme for government, and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, laid out 5 different things that he wants to see done last week. The sort of priorities, very much people's priorities as well, stopping those small boats and halving inflation and getting growth into the economy, cutting the waiting list. So I think he's actually talking about the things that people care about. We're still quite a long way out from a general election, and people aren't really focused on that. What they're focused on is their daily lives and dealing with the things we were just talking about, these very high levels of inflation that, thanks to Putin, have hit the whole of the Western world very, very hard. We're not on our own on this, but the thing that I think Rishi is almost uniquely positioned for, as a former Chancellor, as a finance person, is good, sound management to help get us out of this. So looking forward to working with him over the next couple of years.
Just got about 45 seconds left, Secretary of State. Good business sense to send British tanks to the Ukraine?
I'm terribly sorry, there's a loud...
We're just talking about the possibility of British tanks going to Ukraine. Is that a way to win a war?
Well, look, we've already provided a lot of materials to Ukraine. We got out ahead of other countries and did it before the war, of course, and we provided a couple of hundred armoured vehicles to Ukraine. I can tell you we will be, in the year ahead, providing at least as much support as we have financially as in the previous years. And, of course, this country's generosities run in many different directions, including perhaps 120,000 Ukrainians who are over here, including 3 who live in my house, actually. So this country's been extremely generous when it's come to its response to Ukraine, has led the world, and I'm sure we'll carry on doing that in whichever way is best.
Business Secretary, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your time today, and thanks for braving the elements.
You're welcome.
And as Big Ben bonged behind the Business Secretary there, we'll have more for you at the top of the hour now on the government's potential deal with nurses. See you in a moment. Hopes for a breakthrough on NHS strikes as the government hints at a new pay offer.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It's time 7 o'clock, Tuesday, 10th of January. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Thank you very much indeed for your company.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Health Secretary is considering a pay offer to nurses that could see next week's strikes being avoided. It's a significant shift for the government, and it could take the form of a lump sum payment or backdated future pay.
Prince Harry's book Spare is released today. In a new interview in America to promote it, the Duke of Sussex said the late Queen was sad but not surprised by Megxit.
Britain is considering sending Challenger 2 tanks to the Ukraine. It's the first time a Western country's hinted it'll send its own heavy armour to the conflict and could spare other countries to do the same.
The first space launch from British soil failed to make orbit yesterday. The mission took off from Spaceport Cornwall, but suffered what is being called an anomaly. Did we get alternative words for anomaly?
Not yet.
Orlix.
Or maybe we did. I'll just have a quick look. No. An aberration is what our producer is suggesting. No, most of the views just on Harry, unsurprisingly. Talking of aberrations. Good morning, both. I noticed my local WH Smith yesterday already had this book down to £14 on pre-sale.
An anomaly, a space oddity.
Another anomaly.
Yeah, another one.
Right, back after this.
OK, here's the latest we've got on the negotiations with the NHS. The Health Secretary is considering a new pay offer to nurses to try and stave off strike action later this month.
In a potential major shift in the government's position, the offer could take the form of a lump sum payment or backdated future pay.
Now, it follows yesterday's talks between the government and health unions, which the Royal College of Nursing described as bitterly disappointing.
Well, earlier in the programme, Business Secretary Grant Shapps told us the government's keen to find a solution that will help health workers.
It's in the interest of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole. And, you know, people like nurses do a terrific job and did through COVID, which is why they were the only ones to get a pay rise in the public sector last year with COVID. And we hope that we can find a way forward, a settlement. But today in Parliament behind us, I'll be introducing a minimum safety level, service level bill, which will sort of say, look, we will never withdraw the right to strike from people, but you know, when there are strikes on, life and limb must come first, and there has to be a minimum safety standard put in place for that.
Hey, the diary editor of The Spectator, James Heal, joins us again on this. What did you make from what you heard from the Business Secretary?
Well, it's interesting, this current move that the government's doing to introduce these minimum strike levels, and whether that's going to be in any way sort of caught up with the ongoing pay negotiations will be a really interesting question this week, because on the one hand, the government's saying, look, we want to talk, let's compromise, let's negotiate. On the other, they're saying we're also going to introduce these laws, which makes it very difficult to be on strike in the same way again. So it remains to be seen, particularly when some unions have already talked about potentially launching legal lawsuits over this, and obviously there's going to be presumable difficulties in the House of Commons and the House of Lords about whether these can be enacted before the next election, which Labour currently looks like they're going to win. So it remains to be seen if anything will change on that. I think with the negotiations, I mean, Grant Shapps was quite cagey when he spoke to you just now, and with all these things, it's a bit like sort of papal conclave, and there's a lot of, you know, waiting for white smoke, and then suddenly there's a deal. You know, there's lots of talk of there won't be a deal, there isn't a deal, we've got nothing done, and then suddenly there is something.
Yeah, and I suppose that's just relating to nurses, but as we know, the strikes tomorrow are going ahead for ambulance workers, and a lot of people listening and watching this programme will be hugely concerned about that. And he talks about minimum levels of service to protect life and limb. Well, ambulance workers, that's their exact job, protecting life.
Of course, quite. And I think it's worth also pointing out that when we've got devolution, and you know, you've got things like in Scotland, they've got the primary schools going on strike today, and you've got tomorrow, you've got secondary schools in Scotland, and so teachers will be the key thing to watch out for in England and Wales, because that looks like it's going to be, there's balloting going on this week. We're going to know the results of those strike votes soon, and then of course a lot of people are going to be affected with terms of like COVID, with staying home to look after their children as well.
Outcry if that happens. Can I just say, as a parent whose children weren't able to go to school during lockdown, and the impact that had on family life, on children as well, working parents having children at home, if teachers, who everybody appreciates, do a really important job, but if they force the closure of schools again, which we know has these negative impacts on outcomes for children, oh my goodness, it's going to be a huge story. It's so sad to see that happening in Scotland today.
I completely agree, and I think what's quite interesting is actually that although the government has indicated it's going to be moving on this, I don't think these strikes have worked the same way as, say, they would have done even 10 years ago, and that's partly because of working from home. But of course, if you then suddenly have, you know, school closures, that means you've got people at home have to look after their children, so that will sort of negate those. So it actually means those strikes could be more effective than they would otherwise.
Post-traumatic stress just thinking about.
Good luck with that.
Polling plays a big part in all of this, and you can tell when you talk to ministers, you can tell that they're looking at the polling and they're seeing what public reaction is, and people are heavily behind the NHS situation and settling with the nurses. So they think, we better stick with that one. People are less interested in the real situation and less sympathetic towards all of that. And the same for the postal situation. And it was just interesting talking to him there, that he was basically saying, look, you know, it's for the independent pay body reviews but, you know, and he's getting involved there when he really shouldn't be, I suppose. And he's talking about, you know, if you settle and we'll pay you more, but you will lose your jobs. I mean, you will lose your jobs. This is what it's about. People just forget this is not just about money. This is about getting rid, well, modernising the whole situation, which is a difficult thing. It's turkeys voting for Christmas, and it's very, very difficult.
Well, it's a motive, but I mean, gone are the days where people do one job for their entire lives. Lots of people chop and change, don't they? And you can't not modernise an industry. Because...
Well, if you're a member of a union, what is it going to take for you to say, do you know what, they're looking to get rid of my job? Yeah, I'll vote for that. You're not going to do it, are you?
Well, we've got to get these minimum levels of service laws through then.
Well, yes, and it'll be interesting to see if they can actually get those through. But as you say, when you're discussing all these things, on the one hand, you want to have talk about pays. The unions have an interest in kind of preserving their members' jobs, so they've got to sort of make a case where it's going to be modernisation that costs them nothing. I'm not sure if you can balance those two competing priorities in the way that the government hopes to.
Do you know, he talked about other delivery services as opposed to the Royal Mail. And I just sit day after day and I think, we talk about the environment and whatever. What is good for the environment, getting parcel lorries every 15 minutes to your house? It really is horrendous what goes on. I don't know the way it used to be. We used to go to the shops. Now the shops come to us. We used to go to the takeaways or the restaurants. Now it comes to us. Do we do anything? Do we just sit all day on our backsides? Do we do anything?
Well, lots of people do different things, don't they? It depends where they live.
Yeah, and I think also the more interesting here is maybe not even so much about day-to-day politics, it's about sort of what we want the state to do in state capacity and how these things have changed over the years, as you were talking about, Eamonn, with sort of modernisation and different delivery services, etc.
So if you looked into your crystal ball, James, what would you say in terms of the rail strike and the postal workers strike? What way do you see that heading, both of those heading?
I think that there'll be some kind of negotiated sort of deal. I think that it would probably be, government will try and hide behind this line about the independent pay review bodies. And I think there'll be some kind of sort of sector by sector sort of compromise sort of teased out in the coming days and weeks.
But you know, I wonder what it will achieve. Will it have achieved, both postal and rail, if at the end of the day they settle for job redundancies and they've gone on strike, they've lost pay over so many days? And what are they going to get back in return?
Well, it depends on where you see the nurses, for instance, talked about 18%, and now I think they're moving closer towards 10%, so they'll get some of that. And the key point is obviously inflation is hopefully a temporary thing in the medium term. So by next year, the current levels around 10% inflation will be going down to 5%, and that's when you can have an independent peer review body basing their settlement on that, rather than single figures, rather than double figures, and then hopefully with inflation going down, that'll enable more money in the pockets of these workers going on strike.
Yeah, until you go and pay your gas bill or your heating bill or your electric bill or whatever. And I saw yesterday that the price of wholesale gas has all gone down, but it's not being passed on.
No, yeah.
It's another blooming thing. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is a state of chassis, as Sean O'Casey would say. James Heal, thank you very much indeed. Diary editor of The Spectator. Folks, your views, very, very welcome. What are you going to ask us about that book?
I was just going to say, have you been out to get your hands on a copy of it? We've been talking about it for so long.
I'm just sick and fed up talking about him and his blooming book, and I don't want to read it, and I couldn't care less.
Well, we're going to talk about it, that's for sure. There's 416 pages of juice, dirt, whichever way you want to look at it.
Seriously, would you buy it? How much is it?
Would I buy it? It's 28 quid, absolutely not.
28 quid? How do they justify the price on that one?
Wow.
How do they? Whereas we all know if you wait, by Easter, that's going to be a quid.
Well, we already had one person messaging us this morning saying it was half price in his local bookshop. Look, our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, has been delving inside the pages, so we don't have to.
Several secrets spill off the pages of the 416-page memoir from the Duke of Sussex. Today, it's placed on British bookshelves for the first time. Prince Harry, in his own words, describing what it was like growing up in what he sees as Prince William's shadow. The broadsides and claims paint the tragic story of a man who ultimately blames the press for what he sees as their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. In a promo interview, he branded the Queen Consort dangerous for forging connections with the British press to improve her image. In the book, Harry even accused his own brother, William, the heir, of physically attacking him. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not commented on Prince Harry's allegations. Friends of Prince William reportedly told the Sunday Times he's keeping a dignified silence for the sake of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales wants to keep the spotlight firmly on his charity work and avoid distracting headlines. And the late Queen's motto of never complain, never explain appears to be working for the firm. Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK according to the latest YouGov poll, following his claims that the royal family briefed the press to make him and his wife Meghan look like villains. Prince Harry chose to include some deeply personal stories like how he lost his virginity, but touched on more serious topics, claiming he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his second tour of Afghanistan when he was serving as a British soldier. Several former soldiers are worried Prince Harry's claim will make him, his family, and the British Army more of a target for terrorism. The Prince also describes how he turns to drink and drugs to cope with his mental health struggles, and writes about a private conversation he once had with his father, now the King. Prince Harry says he wants reconciliation with his brother and father, whose coronation is just months away. But the rift runs deep in the House of Windsor, and it's understood both sides wants the other to accept some responsibility. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, in the latest interview, yes, there's been yet another one since we spoke yesterday to promote his book. Prince Harry has been opening up about his hopes of reforming the monarchy and how he thinks the press treated his wife. Let's have a listen.
Wife is not visibly black, but that's who she is. The way that they speak about her and the way they treat her is incredibly relatable to everybody else of colour.
So did it give you a better sense, being with Meghan, about how black women are seen, treated in society as a whole?
Yeah, I'm trying to put a stop to this because I can't ever imagine, and I don't want to imagine, what that would be like for me or for my kids, especially when you talk about history repeating itself, right?
So there we go. That was Good Morning America. That was him talking once again about, I think, what's damaged him in all of this, the death of his mother. You know, history repeating
Understandably.
itself. Yeah.
Now, look, here in the studio now, royal editor, not just a royal editor for now Vanity Fair, Katie Nicholl is a royal expert. I've known her for many, many years. She knows everybody. She's top of her tree in what she does. So I want to ask you straight, and I hope you don't mind me asking you. Camilla, over the front page of the Sun today. We haven't got the Sun today, basically, but what are they calling her? Viper or whatever the heck. Villain, whatever. I want to first of all ask you, any truth, any substance, in your opinion, your extensive connections and knowledge, has Camilla or her people ever come to you and said, right, let me tell you this about Harry and Meghan?
Honestly, no. I'm going to give you an example. I did a big story on the Duchess of Cornwall, as she then was. She wasn't Queen Consort by that point, for Vanity Fair. Now, of course, I went in with the big guns, wanting the sit down, wanting the interview, and I didn't get it. But I was told that, you know, the palace, who usually are pretty unhelpful with things like this, they don't want you sniffing around, they don't want you talking to friends. They said, well, you know, we'll connect you with this charity and that charity, and, you know, this friend might be helpful. So I felt there was access. But not at any stage was it, right, we want a glowing piece on Camilla. And actually, this was a largely positive piece. And by the way, you know, you can have this little morsel about Harry or Meghan that actually just shows how damaging they've been, while Camilla has been this saviour of the royal family. This idea that, of course, there are briefings out of the palace. It is the job of a communications officer to do that. I've never said that they would never say that. But this idea and this fixation of Harry, that there were these negative briefings, these negative stories planted to sort of make him and Meghan look bad at the expense of rehabilitating Camilla's image. Not true. But just one final quick thing is that at the time when, after Diana's death, and when Charles wanted to bring Camilla publicly into their life, into the public's life, into the palace, yes, someone was brought in, Mark Boland, the spin doctor, to rehabilitate. He was in charge of rehabilitating Camilla's image, of turning things around.
So Harry is correct from that point of view that Camilla's image needed rehabilitation.
She had a PR man, and they needed one. Charles's reputation was at an all-time low. She was the most reviled woman in Britain, and when that distance had been given after Diana's death and Charles deciding that he needed to move on with his life, this woman who'd been kept in the shadows needed to be brought out. yes, there was a campaign. Yes, there were people saying, well, hang on a minute. Look at her work with the Osteoporosis Society. There's a story here. Her mother was ill with it. There's a connection. There's some good work being done. And that has been a pattern that has evolved.
Katie, knowing the royals as you do as well, give us a sense of what this will mean to the king to see the words villain in capitals splashed across one of the most popular newspapers in this country.
Well, it goes back
it's the first time in decades I've seen...
I was just about to say, as well, it goes back to those terrible, terrible headlines, what was it, 25 years ago, when she was the most reviled woman in Britain, and that will be deeply hurtful to the king. We're months away from a coronation. Camilla will be crowned too. And I just think she has done a huge amount of work. You know, she would never say she's been perfect, but her work has been, it's been the proof in the pudding. She has delivered. She has turned things around. And so I think for the king, that will be devastating. And I was also told that if Harry he was expecting to come under fire, of course he was. But if Harry got personal with Camilla...
Yeah. That was a red line.
It was a red line and it's been crossed.
Right, well, let me ask you this. You mentioned the coronation. From a purely personal point of view, if this was the three of us bitching about each other and we had to meet socially or...
We'd never do anything like that.
Well, but you know, human reaction would be you would freeze someone out. Now, the royals are more restrained in what they can actually do. How do you see the coronation playing out? Do you invite Harry and Meghan? In which case, if you do, it gives them more material for future documentaries and books and things. If you don't invite them, it gives them material for future documentaries and books. How on earth is that going to be played out?
Well, I think in many ways, and in all of this, Harry does have the royal family over a barrel because they're not going to answer back. They're not going to address every twist and turn in his narrative. I think the king wants ultimately a reconciliation. I think he is a magnanimous man as well, and I think he will take a leaf out of his mother's book. I think there will be an invitation that olive branch will be extended because it is still his son, and I am told, despite all of this, he loves his son. He will have him there.
Look what they've said about Catherine. Look what they've said about Camilla. Look what they've said. Well, who else have they
gaslighting, fundamentally, and people describing Prince William, although he assaulted Harry, as being a punchbag because he cannot publicly respond to all of these allegations. It's incredibly tough on the family.
Listen, it's not easy for anyone. I don't think anyone comes out well of this. I have sympathy for Harry. And I've read the book. You can't read it and not feel sympathy for him. Okay. And I have great sympathy for the royal family, who, as you say as well, they cannot answer back. But I think ultimately, and Harry said this in the Bradbury interview, and it was the one thing I really absolutely thought he'd hit the nail on the head. He said that the royal family is all about unity, and it is. And somehow they are going to have to work this through. There has to be some form of reconciliation. There has to be some sense of moving forwards, because for the king to have the early months or years of his reign overshadowed by the goings-on of this royal rival court across the pond, it's a massive problem. Now, if both are saying they want some sense of reconciliation, OK, let's get that on the table. But it comes down to this bond of trust, which has been badly broken.
Final question. So much in this book, so much detail about things that, quite frankly, are very trivial. Any mention of his uncle and his unsavoury goings-on there?
Yeah, he does.
Say that's much more serious.
He does. He does take on.
Gloss.
Yeah, he does take on the issue of Andrew. He takes on the issue of Andrew and his security. But I think there are certain sort of big royal issues and issues that he's raised that he doesn't go to. The suggestions of racism within the royal family, I couldn't see any of that in there. The idea that Meghan can get therapy, which was obviously a big issue in Oprah, I couldn't see any of that in there. But yes, he does touch on his uncle. And I have to say, it's a beautifully written book.
Yes.
It's a beautifully written book.
A very well-respected journalist who wrote it for him.
Yeah, it's a beautifully written book, but my goodness, hasn't it come at a price? Can he ever get his family back?
We've got the live shot.
The price being 28 quid.
Yes.
Oh, yes, well, I was talking about the price that Harry's been paid for it. You know, was it worth it for him? That's a question for him to answer. But yes, £28. So
show the live shot of the Waterstones in Central London. Let's have a look if people are queuing up this morning. There's a few people in the... I mean,
who's queuing up? What are we looking at there? Is that people actually queuing up?
Yes. There you go, in the rain.
Why would you?
Look, this book is going to sell like hotcakes. It absolutely is. He's
But Katie, why is it? Because I know everything that's in it. Why would I buy it?
Well,
you don't necessarily, because there's 416.
Yeah, there's a lot more in it. And I tell you what, Eamonn, we've heard all the massive stories. I mean, I've gone through it. I can't find anything that anyone's missed.
Yeah.
But for me, and maybe it's just because of the job I've done for so long, it's all the little details.
Yeah.
It's what it was really like to be a child growing up at Balmoral. It was about Club H, the club I first wrote about in my book, William and Harry, and what really happened in Club Highgrove. So I found all of that. For me, it was also the detail was in the minutiae, and that was wonderful detail to read.
That's why you do what you do. That's why you're the best in the business. Thank you very much indeed, Katie Nicholl. Thank you. Let's bring you up to date with this time at 7:22. Rest of today's stories shape up like this. In Scotland, school pupils will miss their lessons this week after last-minute talks between government and teaching unions failed to stop new strikes. The current offer would see most staff in classrooms receive a 5% pay rise, but unions are looking for 10%.
The Irish Foreign Minister and Northern Ireland parties have made progress on the protocol. They've reached an agreement with the EU and the UK on post-Brexit data sharing. Both parties have welcomed the progress, saying it provides a new basis for EU-UK discussions.
And bad news from late last night. An attempt to launch that rocket from British soil has failed. The plane took off from Cornwall last night. The Virgin orbit flew to 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, where the rocket was launched, but it went into space, but not into orbit with the satellites that it was carrying. So over the coming days, there will be an investigation, obviously there will be, into what went wrong and what it will have cost. And, they had one job. They had one job, launch it into space, and it spins
what
around
is it
the
they
world.
say? It's not rocket science. Well, yes, it is. And guess what? It's quite tricky.
Yeah. Well, it's sad it all went wrong.
Yeah,
but
vast
there we go.
expense, I'm
There we
sure,
go.
as well.
Look, we're going to take a break there, and after that, we've got another spacer. Paul Coit will be here. Spacer, that's like a...
I've no idea.
Well, do you not say, use the term spacer? Well, Belfast, you say he's a spacer.
He's a spacer.
I mean, he's, he's a bit
loopy.
Bit off, bit loopy, bit strange.
Well,
Paul Coit.
That's not how I describe Paul Coit, but okay.
Also, the way we could describe Paul Coit, that's kind. But anyway, Gareth Bale, he's packed in football. What's he going to do? Paul will tell us after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deems & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back at 7:27. Still to come on the programme this morning.
At 7:45, new series of Love Island, just days away.
There they are.
Well, they asked me, but I said, no, that's just not at the minute, not until my legs and back get better. But anyway, there's controversy around contestants' promotion of beauty standards. Fillers, lips, hair, whatever goodness.
That's the minimum.
So what are we going to do?
Pecs.
What are we going to do? We're going to ask...
We're going to ask an aesthetics doctor about surgical tweakments, as they're called, and how to avoid botch jobs.
And is he your doctor?
I wish he was.
25 past 8, we're going to be finding out more about the anomaly that caused the rocket launch from Cornwall yesterday to fail in its mission to reach orbit.
And we want to hear from you. Keep those thoughts coming in. Lots of you with plenty to say about supermarkets and about Prince Harry, as well as anomalies.
Do you know what's hurted me the past 2 days? My shoulder.
I know, you need to put your little arm on there.
I broke my shoulder, I should say to you, and I'm talking about shoulder breakages. Only me and
seamless links.
We're like twins.
We are
on this.
We've got one decent pair of shoulders between us, haven't we?
Your left one's gone, my right one's gone.
Oh, really? Well, that's great then. So your right and my left will be perfect. Do they do like a 3-legged shoulder thing or like spoon race or something? I don't know.
I'm like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. So
I was worried it's because I gave you such a big hug when I saw you yesterday. I've set you back.
Didn't hurt me that much. That was good.
No.
Back pages shape up like this before we introduce you to Paul. The Express paying tribute to Gareth Bale. A lot of papers doing that. He's retired, 33 years of age. He says he lived the dream. While he was playing football. Meanwhile, the Telegraph discusses representatives from Qatar meeting with the Spurs chairman Daniel Levy over a possible investment deal. And the Times looks at Chelsea's transfer activity. It seems to be they're in for a provisional loan for Atletico Madrid. Forward. João
because you were worrying about that.
I was worried about João Phoenix, Paul Coite.
Very athletically.
I will.
Eamonn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, my friend. What about Gareth Bale? What's he going to do at 33 and in retirement?
I think he's going to put his feet up. He'll go out, play golf, go back home, put his feet up and enjoy the sunshine. I think that's probably what he's going to do. I mean, as a player... And you, I'm sure, will agree, what a fantastic footballer. I mean, one of the greatest, and really up there with one of the greatest British footballers there's ever been. I will go that far. It started off when he was at Spurs. He signed from Southampton as a kid, and he couldn't buy a win. So Harry Redknapp, our friend Harry, was in charge then. And whenever he started for Spurs, it got to about 20 games. And people were saying that it's almost like it's whenever Bale plays... Spurs lose. And it actually got serious, and Harry Redknapp started worrying about it. And I remember doing an event with Harry, and this is in front of about 100 and 200 Spurs fans, and the question came up, what do you think about Gareth Bale? And I don't know whether Harry would admit to this now, but he stood up, and I remember it word for word, and he said, I've got to admit, I don't know whether the kid's going to make it. And he said, I don't know whether the kid's going to make it, although he did say it could go one way or the other. And we know what happened. And then... he'd said, look, you play a little further in front, move up a little bit. And then he was unplayable. And there were years where he was unplayable. Went to Real Madrid and, 5 Champions Leagues, 3 Europa Super Cups, 4 Club World Cups. We could go on. But the Real Madrid fans turned against him. Yeah. And this is what I just still, for the life of me, cannot understand, how Gareth Bale, and he did so much for that club, they still see him and they're not fans. It's crazy.
But he's 5 Champions Leagues with Real and 4 Club World Cups, 3 European Super Cups.
Yeah.
But you're right, there's still something that just wasn't right. And the Welsh World Cup campaign, of course, that wasn't ideal, was it?
He was the best thing about it, wasn't he?
He was, but he's been the best
about the Welsh team.
You're right.
I can say that as I'm married to a Welshman. I won't get too much hate now.
Well, how is he about Gareth Bale retiring? Is he in mourning at the moment?
To see him go, yeah.
But the thing is, he means so much to Welsh football, and I could use phrases like talisman and all that sort of stuff. But not only is he Welsh football, but also that important and the greatest Welsh player.
But might he go into management or something like that?
I doubt it. Really? I really don't think he's the type. I don't think so.
Golf course for him.
I think live golf.
At 33, I mean, it's the dream.
No, but he could be a pro golfer.
I believe that. I actually do believe that.
Good. Yeah.
There are so many sports people, and you remember even when you were at school, and Eamonn was one of them when you used to run, that you're good at everything, right? If you're good at one event, you're pretty much good at everything.
Your arm, right?
Yeah.
But there are lots of sports, funny, growing up in Ireland, there's lots of sports we didn't do, like cricket.
Right.
Or rugby.
So you missed your calling.
Well, rugby is based on religious bases in Ireland, so it is. So,
it's a Catholic sport.
No, it's the opposite. It's the opposite.
But the Republic of Ireland, it's like a religion there.
It's complicated.
Very confusing. Northern Ireland's very confusing.
It's
the more complicated way it was for me is that we never played rugby at school because it wasn't a very posh school. So it was only football. So there we are. So we could have been professional rugby players and just never got the chance.
Oh, no, I wouldn't want to.
There's a picture of you and Gareth Bale. Is there any chance you might be coming for your job quick?
I think it could be. I mean, there was a picture there. There we are. Now, that's Alan Mullery. That was like about 6 months ago. And there's Alan Mullery there on the left-hand side. Now, this was the night. It was the great night, and they called it the Taxi for Mycon night, when Spurs beat Inter Milan in the Champions League, and it was when Gareth Bale suddenly became a superstar. And Alan Mullery there, legendary England player and former Spurs captain, when I was with him, and he actually said, from what I've seen, it was one of the greatest performances. Would you sign my programme? And he actually signed it there. So that was a very important night for Gareth Bale and even for Alan Mullery as well. But
Alan Mullery, who famously nutmegged Pele.
He did.
Yeah, when he played for Fulham.
He absolutely did.
There as well. What have you got in other news?
Well, there's a game yesterday, and that's the final game in the FA Cup third round. Arsenal, not really a surprise. They've got to... I mean, Oxford got to half-time, 0-0, and I thought they did very well. But Arsenal came through, so they won 3-0. A couple of goals from Eddie Nketiah, who really is... I mean, Gabriel Jesus is out the way, but and now he's injured, and Nketiah is knocking the goals in. João Felix, you mentioned João Felix, didn't you? Now, João Felix, he's a fantastic Portuguese player. £113 million was the fee from Benfica when he signed for Atletico Madrid. Hasn't worked out very well for him, but Chelsea want him. Now, this is incredible because this is going to be a loan deal. So they're talking £9 million. This is just for loan, so there's no obligation to buy, plus they've got to pay his wages as well. So Todd Boehly, who is the man that owns Chelsea, he's been working as the sporting director, he's going to step away from that, but basically it's a centre forward is what they need. So they are spending some money because they need to start getting some more players in. That's what Graham Potter wants.
Just a word about Ronnie O'Sullivan. He never ceases to amaze me. He's the world #1. He's going well in the Masters. The Masters is being played.
Yeah, the Masters at Alexandra Palace is where the darts was. So he threw again 6-1. He beat Luca Brecel into the quarter-final. And really, it's just paying tribute to him because I think he's the greatest snooker player there's ever been. You know, we could go to Steve Davis and Joe Davis, going back a very long way. But the guy's unbelievable. If only snooker was at the popularity it was maybe 30 years ago, then he would be a bigger superstar than he even is now. But just one of the true greats, there's no doubt.
I had the great privilege to host the Masters, and basically I used to get all the jobs Des Lynam didn't want. Des would do these jobs, and then he would say, I can't be bothered.
Give it to Eamonn.
He actually did. So give it to the young Irish guy. and then I would get that. But not Des, but there were other presenters. All brilliant. All these snooker anchors, absolutely brilliant. No auto cue, and they had all these facts and figures. But the brilliant thing was, in those days, the Masters was sponsored by Benson and Hedges.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Right. So. Certain presenters had just fags under the table.
Oh
they would just be smoking all, while the match had been played, and then it would come back to us. The frame would end early or whatever, and they'd be stumping out the
I'd
fags.
lose my mind.
But I used to work with a guy who was a genius, and he had whiskey. He used to always have whiskey and
now
fags
that I could get on
under the, and it was absolutely brilliant. Those were the days.
Who would have thought booze and fags? That was what it was like presenting sport in the day.
Absolutely right.
I remember. I think I know who you're referring to.
Oh, genius. Absolutely.
Was it the great David Vine? Possibly.
It was David Vine.
And he was one of the greats.
Absolutely. Funny. I can't speak highly enough of him.
Absolutely.
And I used to, except he never could pronounce my name.
How can you not pronounce your name?
He would call me. That's it. After the news, Eamonn Holmes continues with the. He used to call me Holmes.
Really?
What's from Holmes? Holmes.
Yeah. You know what?
Even
I think
you don't say Holmes.
He was doing it on purpose. This young Irish whippersnapper trying to take his gig. That's what he was doing.
I learned so much.
I need to crack you two. You're having too much fun. We've got to get to the papers. Paul Coity.
Yes.
Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's get to Martin Dalby and Amy Cameron after this break. See you in a sec.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time to go through the papers. Joining us this morning and already deep in conversation with Eamonn is Martin Dabney, of course, the journalist and former Brexit MEP, and the environmental campaigner Amy Cameron. Welcome back to both of you.
Morning. Where do you stand as an environmental campaigner on fruit flies? We have a plague of little dots that are flying around here. They land up in and you end up itching and scratching. And
I haven't taken a position on them as such, but I think we can get rid of them.
Are you watching that series on Amazon Prime, The Rig?
No.
About an oil rig in the North Sea, right?
I've seen it, yeah, traded.
But it's weird. It's really weird, actually, and I still find myself watching it. Martin Compton is one of the actors in it, and but it's about they drill into the ground, but they release these spores from under the sea that are the life source of all.
What are you on about?
I'm sold. It's weird. It's weird. But
for once, I have nothing to say.
But it's got a great message, environmental message.
Yeah?
Basically, we shouldn't be taking oil out of the ground.
Martin Compton's having a good time, isn't he? He's really on the up. His acting's come a long way, I think. There we go. Yeah.
Lovely. Perfect. Amy, let's talk about the strikes tomorrow. I mean, look, the headlines this morning seem to be sort of favouring the government with this chink of optimism. Not so, though, for the ambulance and paramedics who will still be walking out tomorrow, which will have consequences for patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's too little, too late to some extent. Obviously, all of us are optimistic that an agreement can be found in the coming days and weeks. I do think the situation, particularly with strikes in the NHS, just demonstrates a phenomenal level of, I don't know, naivety, stupidity, incompetence from this government. Public support is so behind NHS workers, and so many people can see, have felt, have experienced that the problems in the NHS far predate the strikes that we're seeing at the moment. They had absolute scope for agreeing a pay deal before now. Circumstances are such, as they keep referring to, right, Ukraine, inflation, etc. They had loads of political headroom to agree something with the nurses, and yet they ignored that. They've got us to this point. I think the conversations from yesterday did sound somewhat offensive to suggest that the problem with the NHS is that nurses and ambulance workers aren't productive enough.
Well, I think that's unfair, to be fair. I mean, these were comments that were made by, which union was it now? Unite outside, who were not inside on the pay discussions.
Someone from Unite was inside, just not the person who spoke to the press.
These comments, right? And you know, this idea that they were talking about productivity, it was probably tone-deaf language. But they weren't suggesting nurses that work 18-hour shifts need to work harder. They were trying to say, we're putting all this money into the NHS, and there needs to be greater efficiencies. And I think that's a fair point, because the taxpayers funding the NHS, it is the most expensive part of the UK's economy.
I don't agree. There's no value on teachers, on doctors, on nurses. We've got to learn to value people.
I'm not saying that.
No, but I do think there is a culture, particularly from government, when government said, and we've pumped, £50 million into this. What's £50 million? It's 5 houses.
It's just the amount
it's 5 houses in London.
Yes, but you look at other comparative economies within Europe, and they spend that spend the same amount, and the outcomes are poorer. And we have
where
to
we're going wrong is treating all of this like a business.
We've
forgotten that it's a caring profession, and that we have to value people and say it is a great thing that you're doing, going into that caring. It's a vocation, not a job. They used to call these vocations, and now, of course, they're all productivity jobs. Nurses and doctors and people who clean up wards and things, they can't do that working from home business.
No, exactly.
They can't sit and do Zoom calls and get their work done. And I just think more and more we've got to appreciate, and this is where I feel about whether it's the posties or whether it's people on trains or whatever, that you've got to say, would you do that job? And would you do that job for that money? And I think those people deserve our respect and our support, rather than, treating them like some sort of product, I don't know.
Yeah, but we can't afford their initial demand. I think they overplayed their hand, the Royal College of Nursing, a 17.6 inflation busting
pay rise, demand £28 billion to the Exchequer simply can't be afforded. So I think they were always going to compromise. I've actually softened my stance on this. I think nurses deserve 10%. And I think they should get 10%. I think they've been underpaid too long, and I agree with you, Eamonn. I think the caring professions they take the mickey out of them because people get into those jobs because they're caring and sharing, but they're undervalued and underpaid as a consequence, and I think there's a societal imbalance in that. And I do
Listen, I've been looked after a lot over the past few months, and it's humiliating and it's humbling for you as a patient, but you look and you say, would you do the job that nurse, male or female, is having to do looking after you?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this before. There are people with that nature.
Well, as you know, I have done that job.
That's
That's
why I'm looking at
you got that. But nurses in this country are paid worse than any other nurses in Europe. We have to ask ourselves why. And as you say, there has to be a better way because we spend more than most of these comparative countries. So this is what I think the government means when it comes to efficiencies. Perhaps it's the government's fault. But what I'm trying to say is we have to structure it better so that we're valuing and paying our nurses who do the caring better. And we're not wasting money on whatever it might be, whether it's pen pushers, middle management,
diversity officers, all that sort of stuff, inclusivity officers,
agency staff.
Agency staff is a massive part of it, though, right? We're spending $3 billion on agency staff. Like the maths of that just doesn't make any sense, which is why I think, again, I come back to saying, like, is it naivety? Is it incompetence? Why are the government not? Why are they not seeing those figures? It just seems like an obvious point, right? They're paying so much.
It's the Treasury behind all this, and the tax departments, which say basically, if you have someone on staff, it costs you more.
Yeah.
So basically, you can pay more to someone who you don't give holidays to, you don't give share options to, you don't give sick leave to, or whatever. So actually, you can pay them a few more quid. But you're absolutely right. The system, and I blame the tax office for this in their pursuit, their greed to get it all in, because the country's broke. Country's broke.
Yeah, but successive governments have got this wrong, and I think it's time for a root and branch overhaul of the NHS. And I'm afraid there's a political resistance to that because it's seen as a church, it's sacrosanct. But we need to really modernise it. And I think all this nonsense about Rishi Sunak, if he takes private healthcare, so what? If it relieves burden,
I agree with you.
If it relieves burden, go for it. Incentivise private healthcare.
Am I outraged? I would be expecting him to have private
certainly
healthcare.
Margaret Thatcher took the view and took great pride in the fact that she used private.
If the Prime Minister isn't taking private healthcare,
there's something wrong.
Something wrong. Of course you would. In industry, in business, you're encouraged to do so. If you contribute yourself and your employer contributes, that lessens the burden on the NHS so the poorest have clearer access. I think we should be looking at both of those routes.
How long have we got left? One more story. Do you know, Amy, I'd like to talk about this story in the Times about the ozone layer. And we don't often talk about the ozone layer anymore, but basically without the ozone layer we'd all fry, we'd all have terrible cancers and all sorts of things. But this seems to be good news that it may be repairing.
It is a good news story, which is fairly unusual in the environment, so I was quite pleased to pick it up. So we're basically on track now. We've still got quite a long way to go. We're talking about it being fully repaired, I think, in the sort of 2060s. So still a way to go, but on track. And I think it's good news in and of itself, but it also speaks to an example of international cooperation on a major environmental issue.
You're telling me China was cooperating on...
So China have been somewhat breaking the rules, but they're now coming back in line with the protocol. One of the things I also think is interesting about this is the Montreal Protocol, which agreed this amongst nations, was Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. So this kind of modern phenomenon of Tories being anti-environmentalists is exactly that. It's a modern phenomenon. Margaret Thatcher, as you might expect, not her biggest fan, but actually she did square the circle of being an environmentalist and a Tory.
She was a scientist. She could see the evidence.
Exactly, and I think the ozone situation is simpler to some extent to a great extent than the climate crisis. But I think it is important for us to celebrate where international cooperation is working.
I'm glad you picked the story because it shows something I said all along: team humanity can win. Humans can innovate, can get around problems. And the reason China fell in line, by the way, is because we banned the sale of their produce that contains CFCs. We hit them economically. They didn't do it philosophically. Nobody was allowed legally to buy their cheap white goods anymore, which contain all the stuff which destroys the ozone layer. Therefore, they stop making them. International sanctions, we should do the same on their coal, on their exports, and start having more coal in Britain.
You've seen that story in Germany, Amy. I'm just pointing this out with that town in Germany where they're going to do open cast mining, and they're going to demolish this village, and basically, so that's carbon emissions into the sky and whatever it is. I forget what the place is called, but basically, this is a big scandal in Germany at the moment.
Yeah, and obviously very close to home as well, because we recently had the announcement on the new coal mine in Cumbria. I find it really interesting because you constantly hear the Conservative Party banging on about the legacy that we leave to future generations when it comes to the economy, and yet when it comes to the environment, they have an absolute blind spot.
We import millions of tonnes of coal, why mine our own? I think it's a sensible policy.
OK. Love Island. It's on your
say goodbye.
TV screens.
Thank you to Martin and Amy, and turn our attention to Love Island. Carry on, as you were. Just ignoring them. I'm just saying my goodbyes, as you were.
Yeah. That's why you were saying. That's why you do things properly, getting your kids to write thank you letters for their Christmas presents and whatever. Very good. But anyway, Love Island. So they'll all be at it next week.
In what sense?
In every way.
Oh, right.
In every way, they'll all be at it on Love Island.
Okay.
And they all. It's all about lips and things, enhancements.
Right.
Breasts,
Okay.
bottoms, all sorts of things like that. So the show has been accused of promoting surgery tweakments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the Metro. We're doing the paper review there, but the front page of the Metro, I don't know if you can see it there, already showing all these pectoral muscles and bikini-clad ladies. You only have to turn inside, and they've got pages. There's the pictures. They've got pages of it in here, double-page spread with the hashtag guilty pleasure. But it just reinforces really what is, quite frankly, an unachievable body image, doesn't it? And I think we all know that youngsters, the young, really do feel rubbish about themselves as a result. Well, let's speak to an aesthetics doctor, Dr. Esho, who joins us now to tell us more. This is a huge problem. Love Island, I'm putting the responsibility not just on them, but on social media as well. These kind of unachievable body goals. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you're completely right. We've seen a significant rise in cosmetic surgery and non-surgical treatments like Botox and fillers across the last 5 years, particularly with the pandemic. We saw the Zoom boom where people were analysing their faces and wanted more treatments based on this. But also social media and shows like Love Island have seen a massive surge and uptake in younger people wanting treatments to have or achieve these unrealistic goals.
OK, are there any tweakments, Doc, that you would say that's OK? I mean, if people had a big turkey neck or something that you can, you could clip away and you could make yourself look better, or need their teeth straightened or whatever it is there anything that you would say, yeah, that's acceptable, that's OK, that's relatively safe to do?
I think the biggest thing with any of these treatments is to realise that they're wants, they're not needs. You're talking about the NHS and nurses and the great value they bring. These are wants. They're not going to save your life, but when done safely, they can improve your life. So the key thing is understanding why you're doing them in the first place. If it's a personal decision, not based on trend or pressures of social media, then that's okay. And as long as it's done safely under a good medical practitioner within a qualified clinic, this is okay. But the problem is when people are going for cheap choices and therefore putting their life at risk for something that is essentially a want, that's where we go wrong.
I think of Katie Price in all of this as somebody naturally so beautiful who has altered her appearance time and again because she's obviously not been happy with the way she's looked, and she's gone overseas and perhaps, in my opinion, botched her beautiful appearance. And we look at, her teeth. We've seen, haven't we, how some of her veneers, she had problems with that.
I look at her, I rarely look at her teeth. But that's not the thing that springs to mind.
No, but she had this incident where all her veneers fell out or something happened, and you could just see her filed back stubs of teeth. It was absolutely awful. But we see this time and again with sort of Towie Brigade as well, all going to try and get a cheap deal on their appearance and ending up with sometimes things that make them look worse.
Yeah, when it comes to your face, your body, your health, you know, we all have a deal, but not getting a deal when it comes pairs to this is the right thing to do. And if you pay cheap, you're going to pay twice. So we see a number of people with this growing industry, unfortunately, seeking cheaper alternatives to get these treatments and not realizing, because of social media, trivializing the procedure, that there are huge risks when it comes to this. You know, you've talked about the file down teeth there, but people have actually died going abroad to have treatments done cheaply, unfortunately. So therefore, you know, when we're doing these treatments, we need to understand why we're doing them. And if we do them, please, we have to do them safely under a regulated practitioner.
And so what is your message, Doc, that if you stay in Britain, you'll be okay? I mean, you can't just sort of say that, you know, everything abroad is going to be awful and going to be botched.
No, I completely agree with you. There are great institutions abroad. What I'm saying is don't base it based on price, based on the fact of why you're doing it in the first place. And therefore, if you are doing it and you do want it for yourself, make sure it's at a qualified, regulated practitioner that's experienced and safe in doing the procedure.
We're out of time, but I just want a one-word answer from you. What is the dodgiest tweakment, the highest risk tweakment that you can have?
The Brazilian butt lift, because that has a fatality, I think, of 1 in 1,000.
Wow. OK, that's us told.
Well,
I'll be scrubbing that off my Christmas list.
Yeah, we're not getting that one done, so we're not.
Dr. Esho, thank you. We've got to go. We'll be back after the break. See you in a moment.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hopes for a breakthrough on NHS strikes as the government hints at a new pay offer.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Tuesday the 10th of January. You're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Health Secretary considering a pay offer to nurses that could see next week's strike avoided in a significant shift for the government. Earlier in the programme, the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, said everyone, including the government, wanted the strikes to come to an end.
He wants this to come to a conclusion. It's in the interests of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole.
Prince Harry's 400-page memoir Spare is released today. In a new interview in the US to promote the book, the Duke of Sussex said the late Queen was sad but not surprised by Brexit.
Britain is considering sending Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. It's the first time a Western country has hinted it will send heavy armour to the conflict and could spur other countries to do the same.
And the first space launch from British soil failed to make orbit yesterday. The mission took off from Spaceport Cornwall, but suffered what's being called an anomaly.
Basically, it went wrong.
A Horlicks is the polite word.
Well, you know, and it's not a launch of a rocket or anything. It was a launch of an airplane. The people who turned up to watch that at 10 o'clock last night.
Don't be mean.
But when they're watching an airplane, why don't you just go down to Bristol Airport or something?
No, it's not just an airplane. It was a historic moment. Unfortunately, not quite in the way they hoped.
That took off.
But then it became something else, or was intended to.
1,000 miles out into the Atlantic.
Well, anyway, there's lots of disappointed people, even tears about this.
If you wake up this morning and there is a rocket or a missile or someone wanted satellites in your back garden, please get in touch with us, and that Spaceport would be very interested to have them back if that was the case. gbviews@gbnews.uk, and let us know where you find it, where you're watching, where you're listening from.
Okay, our top story this hour. The Health Secretary is reportedly considering a new pay offer to nurses in an attempt to avoid strike action next week.
It's a major shift in the government's position. The offer could take the form of a lump sum or backdated future pay.
Well, it follows yesterday's talks between the government and health unions, which the Royal College of Nursing described as bitterly disappointing.
Now, earlier in the programme, the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, told us the government is keen to find a solution to help health workers.
It's in the interests of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole. And, you know, people like nurses do a terrific job and did through COVID, which is why they were the only ones to get a pay rise in the public sector last year with COVID. And we hope that we can find a way forward, a settlement. But today in Parliament behind us, I'll be introducing a minimum safety level, service level bill, which will sort of say, look, we will never withdraw the right to strike from people, but you know, when there are strikes on, life and limb must come first, and there has to be a minimum safety standard put in place for that.
Well, let's speak to our political reporter, Olivia Utley, who joins us in the studio about all of this. Look, all very well introducing this bill into Parliament today to protect, as he says, life and limb, but it's too late, isn't it, for the ambulance strikes, which is going ahead tomorrow. Lots of people will be very concerned about that.
Well, absolutely, and this bill could help in the medium to long term, but we already know that there are going to be issues with it even further down the line. We know that it'll probably be held up by the House of Lords. It could well be held up by the courts. The government's argument is that similar legislation is in place in France and Germany to ensure minimum service is provided, and that it would only apply to ambulances and nurses. But we still know there are going to be plenty of issues with it as we go forwards. As for right now, in the short term, of course, it's not going to do anything at all. It did look yesterday as though we were heading for sort of breakthrough territory, although the unions wouldn't quite have put it like that. Steve Barclay has offered, well, is on the verge of offering, very much on the verge of offering, either a lump sum or some sort of backdated pay for next year. And in the rails, something similar is being talked about. Not quite over the line yet. It's thought that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt are worried about doing something like that because obviously it could set a precedent. But it feels like that might be the solution in the short term. Whether it'll be enough to stop the strikes that are taking place imminently isn't clear yet.
But Olivia, as you allude to, where do you stop? The postal workers, the teachers, where do they draw the line on this one?
Well, exactly, that's the issue. And that's why so far the government has held out against doing any sort of lump sum. The hope is for the government that a lump sum would sort of help them to save face. It wouldn't be technically a pay rise for this year, which they keep saying is impossible. It would be a hardship sum to cover the next 3 months, to cover the cost of living crisis. But as you say, of course, it's very likely that pretty much every other public sector worker will demand the same, because why wouldn't they?
Can I ask you about what Unite was saying outside those talks yesterday? I mean, really strong language that what the government had talked about was an insult, it was outrageous, it's ludicrous. On the front of the left-wing paper, The Mirror, this morning, talking about work harder, because they asked to talk about productivity. There's a bit of a sort of twisting, is it not, of what's been going on behind closed doors, and perhaps, I have to say, an unfair representation of what happened in Downing Street yesterday.
Well, the very strange thing about this is that this Onay Kassab, who's the chief negotiator for Unison, wasn't actually in the meeting at all. So he's reporting on second-hand information. And what it sounds like is that, you know, we weren't there, but what it seems pretty clear happened is that Steve Barclay wanted to link a pay rise to cost-saving efficiencies to be found in the NHS, which one would expect in any sort of normal business. And Sarah Gorton, who's the head of the bigger union, Unite, which represents more NHS workers. Sorry, Unison, I've gotten the wrong way round. Was pretty optimistic about it. She said we weren't quite at breakthrough level, but the government is making the right noises, essentially. So this story, which we see on the front of the Mirror about the Unite chief negotiator, Onay Kassab, calling it an insult, isn't quite what we're seeing in the rest of the media, really.
Yeah, I think it was an important point to make there. And what about Boris comeback? He's talking at the Carlton Club tonight. And
There's a lot of people getting giddy over this, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. Boris seems to always be planning some sort of comeback. He does have plenty of supporters still in the parliamentary party and beyond the parliamentary party too. And more importantly than that, perhaps, plenty of the donors are still on his side. There are thoughts that Rishi Sunak just doesn't have the sort of charisma to stand any chance of winning a general election. The words that we keep hearing from Boris's camp are a managed decline, and that is obviously the very opposite of what Boris is doing.
Seat. So the idea that this is some sort of electoral god, but he might lose his own seat.
Absolutely. His majority is wafer thin, and if anything like what we're seeing in the polls happened at the next general election happened in real life, yes, Boris Johnson would lose his seat. So probably a bit of a trumped-up story, but quite exciting.
Interesting. There we go.
Olivia, thank you. Appreciate it. Olivia is our political reporter. Thank you very much indeed. So the Prince Harry book has finally been released today. You
Guess
will
how
be
much?
Yeah, would you queue up to spend, what does it say there? 28 quid.
£28 or $34,
You know,
we were told.
If I was buying something special that was really well illustrated, there's not even a picture in that.
Not a single photograph.
Yeah. But you know, when you buy something that you would like to have on your shelf and you'd say, well, I'll spend 28 quid on that maybe. But who during the cost of living crisis is going to pay 28 quid to listen?
Tell you what, though, lots of people are saying they've been getting half-price versions, and, you know, I could think of worse things to peruse at bedtime.
Well,
just
it's all in the newspapers.
Page 2, let me just give you a little insight.
You're going to read a story?
Oh, very quickly,
right.
Just one line. Maybe our mother would be here if she hadn't married Pa. That's page 2.
Wow.
Basically. I mean, it's probably not true, not wrong, but, you know, packs a punch. Our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, has all the details.
Several secrets spill off the pages of the 416-page memoir from the Duke of Sussex. Today, it's placed on British bookshelves for the first time. Prince Harry, in his own words, describing what it was like growing up in what he sees as Prince William's shadow. The broadsides and claims paint the tragic story of a man who ultimately blames the press for what he sees as their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. In a promo interview, he branded the Queen Consort dangerous for forging connections with the British press to improve her image. In the book, Harry even accused his own brother, William, the heir, of physically attacking him. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not commented on Prince Harry's allegations. Friends of Prince William reportedly told the Sunday Times he's keeping a dignified silence for the sake of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales wants to keep the spotlight firmly on his charity work and avoid distracting headlines. And the late Queen's motto of never complain, never explain appears to be working for the firm. Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK according to the latest YouGov poll, following his claims that the royal family briefed the press to make him and his wife Meghan look like villains. Prince Harry chose to include some deeply personal stories like how he lost his virginity, but touched on more serious topics, claiming he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his second tour of Afghanistan when he was serving as a British soldier. Several former soldiers are worried Prince Harry's claim will make him, his family, and the British Army more of a target for terrorism. The Prince also describes how he turns to drink and drugs to cope with his mental health struggles, and writes about a private conversation he once had with his father, now the King. Prince Harry says he wants reconciliation with his brother and father, whose coronation is just months away. But the rift runs deep in the House of Windsor, and it's understood both sides wants the other to accept some responsibility. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Cameron now joins us in the studio. And Cameron, you picked up the book during the middle of the night, and there you are.
I have.
Were you able to find out anything that you didn't already know from the various interviews?
What do you think? What strikes me, Eamonn, is the little details of what it was like growing up as a young prince behind the scenes at Balmoral. He speaks about the fact that the late Queen's speciality at the Balmoral barbecues was making the salad dressing. He talks about his the King's favourite aftershave, TV dinners under a domed.
What his favourite aftershaves called? TV dinners?
No.
Right, no.
It sounds something. It's something French, and it retails at £74, is what I remember as it stands. And the brownish water that comes out the taps. And how Prince Philip used to be really amused when guests were horrified by the brown water that comes out the Balmoral taps. So it's those little details, like or loathe Prince Harry, which I think is making this book a really kind of fascinating read.
Yeah. So £78 for his favourite aftershave, £28 for that book.
Yeah.
I thought people weren't supposed to have any money after Christmas. I mean, who's going to be buying this?
Well, yesterday it was number 4 on the Amazon bestseller list in the UK, which of course was before it was even out on sale. We haven't got the figures yet for this morning, but it was retailing at half price at £14, which perhaps suggests how much people are willing to read it.
More realistic.
But you say that, Eamonn, but people were buying it at midnight at newsagents in train stations.
Well, funny, we're going to go to central London now. We're going to go to a what?
In a bit, we will be going to
I was just going to go to pictures. We've got nothing.
Well, let's have a look at this instead. This is that's the live picture there, of Waterstones in central London. A few queuing up. You can see the full window devoted to Prince Harry and his book. But I just wanted to talk about this with you, Cameron. Front of the Sun, huge paper in the UK, the kind of headline the King will not be happy with over his breakfast this morning.
He's very sad about it. It's just not happy with, but obviously
it's the phrase red line. That implies there will be ramification, there will be repercussions. What will the repercussions be for Harry for turning on his stepmum?
It's been widely reported that Camilla was always going to be Charles's red line. I don't think the Queen Consort has had headlines like this for 25 years following the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. As it stands, the official line from Buckingham Palace is no comment. They're not doing anything. Perhaps that's wise, because it would just add fuel to the fire. However, I'm sure behind the scenes there are conversations happening.
Well, we know lawyers have been calling up TV studios whilst, particularly in America, I think they took a call from Buckingham Palace's lawyers whilst the ABC interview was being aired, because previous...
What was the concern?
He'd made comments about the royal children and their safety, and the lawyers had obviously been instructed to get the full context of the interview, and they were asking for transcripts. And according to the Telegraph anyway, this is not the first time that's happened in relation to all of his publicity.
Yes, and I've spoken to a source at ITV who clearly aired the Tom Bradby interview, and from my understanding, those with inside Buckingham Palace did ask to see the full interview ahead of time before they decided whether or not to make any kind of comment. ITV has, from my understanding, refused to give Buckingham Palace the full interview of Tom Bradby ahead of time, with Prince Harry promoting his memoir, and therefore they have not commented. But clearly there are a lot of, as we've seen on the front page of The Sun, a lot of damning allegations Prince Harry even has made against the Queen Consort, branding her as dangerous for what he sees as colluding with the press. I think the counter-argument to that is that Queen Camilla, Queen Consort, has got fairly good press coverage over the last few years or so due to the charity work she has done, the work she's done with osteoporosis. Her mother and grandmother both died from that disease. Children's literacy, tackling violence against women. So perhaps the counter-argument is, on merit, she is receiving good headlines and good publicity.
I have to say, we started to get a few emails and messages this morning saying, I'm really tired of Harry now. And I wonder, do you think that they have exhausted every avenue, that people are just... I mean, at the front of the Mail saying no way back from this, and do you feel that's probably right?
Yeah, and the Metro says Britain has enough, I think, as well, spelt H-A-Z. I think what's going to be the challenge for Harry and Meghan now is getting out of this victim narrative, which they have really pushed, since Oprah in 2021. Because you're right, I think even in the United States, I was there with William and Catherine in December for their Earthshot Prize, and the sense I was getting, even from the States, who are presumably more in favour of Harry and Meghan than perhaps the British public are here in the UK, even they, I think, are growing tired of the same kind of complaints, as it were, being repeated time after time in various interviews or books or Netflix series, for example. So if they want to get back in public favour with their charity work, and as Prince Harry says in one of the interviews, if the King wants him to be part of the Commonwealth message and do work abroad in the Commonwealth, they should really perhaps stop this victim narrative they've been pushing.
But how do they exist if they're not victims? I mean, the whole sob story plays out really, really well.
Well, many are suggesting that the reason they're playing that is because it sells, Eamonn, doesn't it? Yeah. Millions of pounds for this book, millions of dollars even for this book deal. Harry's argument is he needs it to pay for his own security. We saw a glimpse of that overnight when he was...
Well, if he didn't talk about killing 25 Taliban, he might need a bit less security. I reckon he will need that security now, though, Cameron. Let's go down to that shop in, I presume we're in Piccadilly at Waterstones here. But Ellie Costello, central London here. And Ellie, my question is really on this bleak, dank, dark, windy, wet morning. Who on earth gets out of bed to queue up and buy a 28 quid book that we know what's inside it already? Good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel, and it's so good to see that, Eamonn. Really, really good to have you back on GB News. But let me tell you, not many people were here filming and also queuing to get this book. Let me tell you, only one person was here at 8 o'clock this morning when the doors opened at Waterstones, Piccadilly. Her name was Caroline. She's been absolutely inundated by the press. She said she came because she wanted to find out what Harry had to say from the horse's mouth. We've got a clip of Caroline which we're going to show a little bit later on in the morning. But there must have been 40 or 50 journalists. We're just going to show you here. There's a babble of journalists still here outside the shop, but only one customer here at 8 o'clock this morning. You can see behind me, and if you're listening on the radio, loads of copies of Spare in the window of Waterstones, Piccadilly. We've come to know that image and that title so very well over the past week. And it is really interesting what you say there, there, Eamonn, has all of the leaks here, has that helped or hindered the sales of this book? Because here at Waterstones, there was only one customer here this morning. They were open at midnight last night, and there were a number of customers in the queue then. There were bookshops up and down the country that opened at midnight to allow people to have that first access to that book. But seemingly so this morning, first full day of sales, only one person here so far. And this book, we have been told, had the same level of security as the Harry Potter books did in the early noughties. But there has been such a chaotic series of leaks in the past week. There was the publication of the books in Spain, and it has absolutely dominated the newspapers over the past few days. So perhaps some people feel as though they already know the contents of the book. Perhaps it means that some people have already got Harry fatigue. They don't want to know anymore. But according to Caroline, who is here this morning, she wants to take the opportunity to read Harry's words in context, and that is why she was here at 8 o'clock this morning. But I'll be here all day finding out if anybody else turns up to buy the book, and I will be buying my own copy this morning to read in context what Prince Harry has to say.
You'll be buying your own copy, and the lady who turned up at 8 o'clock buying, but are you forking out full retail price on this?
Well, Eamonn, this is what's very interesting. If you look behind me here, and if you're listening on the radio, you can see this red sticker saying half price. And Waterstones are selling Spare at half price, so retail price £28, but on sale it's £14. Amazon have decided to do the same, also selling for £14. Very interesting that they've decided to do that. Do they need to halve the price in order to push further sales? But it does seem to be working already. Waterstones, the boss of Waterstones, has said that it's one of the most best-selling books in terms of pre-orders in the last decade, and it's already topping the bestsellers list on Amazon as well. So perhaps that half price is helping with the sales, but it will be interesting to see next week when we get the figures of the sales of the first day, how many people actually came out in the wet, the rain and the wind to buy their copy of Spare.
Point out that even if those sales are good, that doesn't necessarily mean it's an endorsement or a fan of Harry and Meghan. It's people who are sort of potentially rubbernecking. They want to see the filth themselves. I've got to leave you there, Ellie. Thank you very much indeed for that. I also want to pick up on the point Cameron made about how, you know, it sells this stuff, this salacious stuff. I actually believe the stuff about the brown water in the taps at Balmoral and the details about the Queen and her salad dressing, that would be enough. I'm interested enough in those kinds of little bits and insights into the royal family. You don't have to dish the dirt. Maybe I'm just old-fashioned.
No, it's funny. When I wrote my best-selling Sunday Times
it's a good read.
offer,
it's a good read.
My autobiography, some 15 years ago.
I'm not mentioned in it, though.
You're not. That was pre-you.
Yeah.
BI, before Isabel. But basically, the book company, they wanted me to write about stars and people that I'd met and whatever along the way. But the biggest interest from people when they would speak to me about it was my life before I was on telly.
Yes,
that's
your
really
childhood. Well, it was a fascinating childhood, more interesting than most people's, I would argue.
But that, as you say, I think often it's the ordinary things that appeal to people.
Yeah.
They know who the finished product
like
is.
Mice in your wellies.
Like, did I ever tell you that story?
Well, I read it in your book, and I'll never forget it. Tell us again.
Well, you see, the building we work in is infestated with mice, right? So basically, and I have, not that we were not supposed to tell anybody.
Well done.
That,
Yeah,
right,
done
right. Did I let that out?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I have a phobia about mice. Mice really send me freaky. And it's because when I was 4 or 5, we had under our stairs what was called a coal hole. Right?
A coal hole.
All right. So basically, it was a door, and that's where you stored the coal.
Yeah.
But also, we would store things like our what we called water boots or Wellington boots. Yeah, in there. And one day, I was putting my water boots on, and I couldn't get my foot into it. And my mum says, "For goodness sake, squeeze your foot into that." And I said, I can't, Mum, I can't." And she said, "Give it to me." And she pulled it off my foot, and turned it upside down, and a big grey mouse came out of it. Yeah, well, I'm phobic about mice.
I'm not surprised. You nearly killed that with your bare foot.
Never mind, but it nearly killed me. Nearly killed me, that. So, and then we had in the door of our coal hole Do you know when Tom and Jerry, they're mice holes?
yeah.
And mice holes are like perfectly half-moon shaped.
Yeah.
We had perfectly half-moon. I've only ever seen them in Tom and Jerry cartoons, but that
And
mice...
your own home.
Yeah, that mice obviously had teeth, but it ate through the door in a semicircle.
Wow.
A little place where it lived.
That's factually accurate
It lived in
Tom
there.
and Jerry. Love
yeah.
it.
Yeah. But we lived beside a fruit and veg shop.
Well, that's why they were nibbling on the.
See, they would come through the fireplace. They would be in the potatoes and the
they're
cabbages.
having babies in my ear.
Are they?
Yeah, they want you to stop.
Yes, but this is the point. What's the point of having me on if you're not going to listen?
I agree.
Let's go to the break, and we're going to talk
More
about that.
detail in the autobiography.
We're going to talk about that rocket
in all good bookshops.
that got lost and might be well in your coal hole or back garden or stuck in your chimney today.
Stop
but anyway,
talking anomalies.
we're talking about that after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. It's 8:28. Still to come on the programme this morning. At 8:45, we are speaking to the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Jonathan Ashworth, and we'll be asking him about Labour's plan to get people with long-term ill health back into work. Then, just after 9 o'clock, we'll be speaking to Strictly Professional Giovanni Panici, who has created some daily dances to try and improve people's health. And as ever, we would love to hear your thoughts on any of the topics we are discussing this morning. As I've been saying all morning, so many emails and texts and tweets all about Prince Harry and his book, and a lot of you just so tired of it. Had enough. Keep those thoughts coming in. So it was supposed to be a historic moment, the first space rocket to launch from UK soil, but it failed in its mission to send satellites into orbit. It was just after 10 o'clock last night. The rocket blasted 35,000 feet into the atmosphere as thousands stood round to watch. But shortly before midnight, a live stream announced that the mission had failed. Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody spent the entire day and most of the night there and has sent us this report.
They came by the busload, eager to witness history.
Once in a lifetime thing, it might not happen again in our lifetime, so thought we'd come and see it.
Very exciting.
This means so much to the Cornish, a fledgling space industry that's set to earn the duchy £250 million a year. Jobs, opportunities, the sky's the limit. Spaceport Newquay has waited months for a flight window, a time when conditions are just right. Back down on Earth, the drinks flowed, the party started. But then, Newquay, we have a problem.
It appears that Launcher 1 has suffered an anomaly which will prevent us from making orbit for this mission. We are looking at the information and data that we have gotten.
It's now 5 to midnight, and there's been a real party atmosphere here at Newquay. But the plane is just coming into land now, and we've heard that there's been an anomaly, and the mission hasn't succeeded. The atmosphere here has suddenly changed.
Well, I don't know what went wrong technically. Everything seemed to be going perfectly well. You know, the plane took off, the rocket left the plane as planned, and then something in that final phase of getting the rocket into the right orbit has clearly gone wrong, which meant the satellites couldn't be released. I mean, hugely disappointing. But I still think an awful lot for us to be positive about from Spaceport Cornwall's point of view tonight.
As the news filtered through, people drifted away. It wasn't the evening they hoped for. It's not what Spaceport Cornwall hoped for either.
Yes, it made the wrong orbit. So if you think about going round the Earth, it will be kind of its height. So it will have reached a limited height into space. But effectively that second stage burn was trying to get it to about 500 kilometres above the Earth. That didn't happen. So we need to work out what happened and why that was the case.
Yeah, awful. To be honest, I'm not gonna lie. It was just like, it was gutting. We all heard at different times. So once we kind of all got together, there were tears, and it was very upsetting.
It's not the end. Space missions sometimes fail, and with each failure they learn, they adapt, they try again. But no one doubts the ferocity of this blow. The team will now rest, regroup, and reach for the stars again. Jeff Moody, GB News.
I bet that cost a pretty penny. Let us know your thoughts on that. Stay with us after the break, going through the papers this morning. Martin Dabney and Amy Cameron back for that. See you in a sec.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own news from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Here are your front pages. If you're going out today to get the newspapers, they look like this.
The Sun leading with villain Camilla as Prince Harry goes after the Queen Consort, accusing her of ruthlessly seeking the crown.
Guardian leads with the NHS strikes, unions blaming ministers for failed talks. But today we're reporting on a new pay offer which could be on the horizon.
The Telegraph says UK tanks could be on their way to the Ukraine.
Financial Times focuses on a deal between Britain and the European Union which could lead to progress on the Northern Ireland Protocol. Could I just say, nobody understands the Northern Ireland Protocol. Nobody, not even us who live there. Nor do we know if we are beneficiaries of it. Some people are quite in favour of it, and some people are not for political reasons. But it is another Horlicks. It's another one that nobody knows whether it's a good thing or a bad thing politically or economically. But they say there may be a breakthrough in all of this. Watch this space until next year or the year after or whatever. What are we going to do now?
Oh, we're going to go through the papers. And Martin, we're going to focus on the Mail. And unbelievably, Harry, in his memoir Spare, has managed to make us even turn against him on what up until now has been a respected legacy. We know what he did as an Apache pilot, incredibly accomplished, and now, you know, those in military circles critical of what he said about it in his book.
Well, of all the revelations in Spare, I think the most dunderheaded and downright dangerous... Dunderhead's a good word. It is a good word, and it really applies to the Spare part, Prince. Bragging about killing 25 Taliban soldiers.
Did he brag? I mean, he said he wasn't proud of it. Let's go...
Why mention it?
He said, I'm not proud, but I'm not ashamed.
Why mention it at this stage? It's something that could have been put to bed a long time ago, a bit like dressing as a Nazi. Anyhow, what we have now is a very predictable fallout. We have the preposterous situation where Taliban-backed academics in Afghanistan are calling his words cruel. They're holding up bits of paper, look, a bit like Bring Back Our Girls with Michelle Obama. We're allowing these guys to be the good guys. Secondly, you might remember Dr. Hook, Anjem Chowdhury, the hate preacher who was jailed for 5.5 years for backing ISIS in his lectures. He is now coming out and he's urging his followers globally to target British troops and specifically Muslim troops as a direct threat. He is urging action. Thirdly, we have a character called Mullah Abdullah, who is claiming he lost family members in Afghanistan, calling for compensation during wartime. Now, why don't you go first? The estimated cost of 9/11 was £36 billion. The fact of the matter is, the Taliban are giving us a moral lecture thanks to Prince Harry's incredibly ridiculous and stupid revelations.
I just think for a man who personally worries about his security and complains about it not being funded by the British taxpayer, why would you bother? Why would you even go there?
I don't understand why he did this. I do think it was a moment, in some ways I think there was a moment of kind of sort of shocking honesty about it, because he does speak effectively about how dehumanising being in the military is, and I think that is something that you will hear other servicemen state.
Here is the thing, I think there is an honesty about it, an honesty from the authors of the book, not the authors of the book, the publishers, saying, hey, what have we got here? Why are people going to buy this? Give us more. Give us more. We need more here. And that's what, doing it for money leads you to.
But a friendly editor should have put a hand around his shoulder and said, Harry, leave that bit on the cutting room floor.
Yeah. The Eye, Amy, more than nearly 1.5 million households are looking at higher mortgage rates, and this will cause huge distress with people. The average £300,000 mortgage goes up £661 in a year.
Yeah, I mean, these figures are terrifying for anyone looking at remortgaging this year. We've known this is coming for a while, obviously, since the absolutely disastrous budget of last year. Kwasi Kwarteng and Truss's budget was what first sent mortgage costs spiralling. Obviously, it's related to the inflation crisis that we're experiencing more generally. There's a stat in this article as well in the Eye that the number of people who are saying they're finding it somewhat or very difficult to afford their rent or mortgage payments is also increasing, 27% up to 31% in December. So we can expect to see that just continuing to soar as the year carries on. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this is that the Tories have a problem with young people, or younger, not even that young people anymore. We've seen, there was polling out the other week that said that the usual trend of as you get older you become more conservative, is that trend is breaking. Now millennials are actually getting more lefty, and stories like this are the reason for it. The only solution Tories have at the moment to try and build support amongst young people is housing. So that's what you heard from Simon Clarke last year around the Levelling Up bill. Build more houses, because the old equation was house buyers equal Tory voters. But that's broken down now, because too many people are facing these extortionate mortgage costs.
Yeah, and Sajid Javid, who we know is standing down, has said this is one of the reasons he is walking away from politics, because he really feels as though, with the inability to make these changes in housing under the Conservatives, young people will not feel they have any capital, any stake in the country, and therefore capitalism is failing young people.
I've got a point.
I think to hear a former Chancellor say something like that is incredibly powerful.
Why aren't the same young people who can't afford to buy a house annoyed about open borders and a net immigration of 1 million per year, when quite clearly there's not enough houses being built to house everyone and rents are going through the roof?
Because their analysis is more sophisticated than that, right?
Why?
So
it's a supply and demand market. If 1 million people come in and you don't build enough houses to accommodate 1 million, prices of houses and price of rent both go up.
But there is a far greater problem in terms of housing. I think that's a total misrepresentation. And I think what young people recognise is that it's an attempt to scapegoat what is, in fact, as Isabel points out, a failure of capitalism to serve young people's needs.
No, it's not
so you've got a situation now where they aren't building enough houses. No, absolutely not. There's also very poor rental regulation in the UK, which means that landlords, house-owning people, can make phenomenal amounts of money from young people.
Well, I think they're going to be hit with the next budget and things like that. It'll become less profitable. But you made an interesting point, Amy. You said that house ownership, property ownership equals Conservative voters. So is the reverse true? Because I have this thing about social housing and
Yes.
just why is it being sold off? Why do people like Boris Johnson want to sell it off without replacing it? The need, and never has it been more apparent than today's cost of living crisis, the need, the moral obligation for social housing is indisputable.
There's so much in that. I think it's something like only 1 in 5 social houses are replaced as they're sold off. And the way that we've what social housing used to stand for was also very diverse communities of people living alongside one another. That's what you see in
Teachers
other
with
countries.
motor mechanics, with people who were unemployed.
Exactly, and I think all of that stuff is so important to the fabric of our society, which I think everyone would agree, whether you're right or left, is breaking down. Take a city like Vienna. 60% of people in Vienna live in social housing. That means that it includes professionals, it includes students, it includes people out of work. I think that's so important in terms of like healthy communities.
Hugely expensive.
Yeah, massively expensive, and they pay much higher tax.
They've got
It's a
very,
much
very
smaller
high
city
quality of life.
than any of the big.
But I'm just using it as an example to say social housing in this country has become something which we only kind of feed out as scraps to those who are most desperate, instead of being a viable and affordable way for anyone to live. The housing market in the UK is gone wild. The Tories are totally stuck in a bind here, though, because their older voters, who they are now heavily reliant on, will not want to see anything which results in a falling of house prices, because for so long we've been told that that's your pension.
Build more houses, have less immigration, or ideally both.
I'll stop with you on the first point. Build more houses, full stop, we're done.
It's quite simple. Supply and demand.
It's all about supply and demand. Eurovision. So Sex Pistol John Lydon, he wants to represent Ireland in Europe. I presume he's of Irish descent.
His mother was Irish, and this on the face of it is quite a kind of rebellious, punky story, the godfather of punk, of course, and also, by the way, a proud Brexiteer. I always said Brexit was punk rock and Remain was Pink Floyd. And here he is wanting to vie forward for the Eurovision entry for Ireland, now with his band Public Image Limited. Now, on the face of it, it's quite an amusing story, but when you look into it, it's actually very moving. His wife of 50 years, his partner Nora, who has long-term Alzheimer's, he is her full-time carer, where they live in Los Angeles. And his song called Hawaii refers back to a precious moment they had in Hawaii together when they travelled and she was still able to remember it. So on the face of it, it's quite quirky and rebellious. On the heart of it, it's actually a really moving love story. And he hasn't got the gig yet. Six acts are going for it. I hope he gets it. I think he's amazing. And it really shake up the whole contest, although, of course, being a Brexiteer, he'll probably get nil points.
The Ireland used to win it every other year.
I know, they did.
Johnny Logan, what's another year? Dana, all kinds of everything.
Oh, well, was that when Terry Wogan used to do the commentary?
Yeah, it was hilarious.
Yeah, it was
an Irish.
He was on the Baileys.
I love a bit of Eurovision.
Should we finish on Love Island?
Yes.
Any of you big avid watchers?
So
I'm an avid watcher of Maya Jama.
Yes, you're a big Maya Jama fan, aren't you?
I think she may attract me.
What's not to like?
Yeah.
I have to admit, I'm a Love Island watcher. I've got into it the last couple of series. I was just saying this to Martin. The thing I really like about something like Love Island is I love water cooler TV. I love television programmes that everyone is watching. The kind of stuff that if you go and get your hair done or you find yourself chatting to someone in a queue, it's a real point of commonality. I think that's what I love about programmes like this. But the one thing I wanted to say, just following on from the piece you had on earlier about plastic surgery, is I don't know if you guys watched The Traitors pre-Christmas.
No, I know what it is. That's the Claudia
hugely successful reality show on BBC, yes, which I think reminded us that you don't have to be a sort of glamorous Instagram influencer to make for interesting reality TV. People actually love people. They love to see normal people.
Complexities of people.
Personally, I would love to see Love Island.
Abnormal people too.
Yeah, they absolutely do.
That's basically, the more abnormal the better, which for reality.
With Love Island, I think these people aren't desperate enough. You know, they're young, they're beautiful, they'll be able to get boyfriends or girlfriends at the click of a finger when they leave.
Yeah.
I want to see some mid-30s women in a fertility panic.
Yes.
That's what I want to see.
Putting your hand up?
Exactly.
But I agree with you that there would be an audience for that too.
Absolutely, there
agree
would.
with you. All sorts. I think there should be not exactly a Love Island, but a Silver Surfers Island.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where there would be more mature, silver-haired men.
You're putting your hand up.
Back to sense of maturity. Who have a certain magnetism for women.
Eamonn's pitching for more business live on TV.
You just want to get close to Maya Jama, don't you?
I think do you know what? I think in the Maya Jama and I there would be a chemistry.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm sure Ruthie would be on board with that. That's all I'm saying. We say goodbye and thank you very much to Amy Cameron and Martin
actually,
Spicy. We've got a ministerial interview now, so we need to
is he
pop off.
there?
He is indeed. He's ready to go.
Okay, the minister we're talking about is Jonathan Ashworth. Jonathan's the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Jonathan. We're sorry, we were off on a Love Island rant there just before we came to you. But one of the stories I was going to go to, Jonathan, there was about Wes Streeting. And there was a suggestion associated with him that there should be an all-out ban from the government on the sale of cigarettes. So he raised this idea in a push for fresh, radical thinking. And the idea was this would take pressure off the NHS when you think of all the sickness caused by smoking. Now, I'm not sure how practical, how serious that is or whatever it is, but generally, it does get us all thinking as to why are we still doing this? Why are we still allowing all of this?
Well, can I just say, I'd much rather be on Love Island in the sunshine. It's absolutely bucketing it down with rain here. But anyway, I'm always delighted to be on GB News anyway, obviously. Look, I mean, we know smoking is one of the biggest killers in the country. It causes absolutely awful disease. I think Wes is suggesting that we should look at ways in which we can reduce smoking. He's consulting on proposals. I think he was floating an idea that is happening in New Zealand, but this is all up for consultation, and he wants to listen to the views of the British people on this, and I'm sure he'll come on GB News and talk to you about it and listen to the views of GB News viewers as well.
This be unworkable? Is this about tax revenue?
Well, I mean, smoking, it causes absolutely awful disease, doesn't it? Not just things like lung cancer, quite obviously, but it impacts on your cardiovascular health, which leads obviously to heart attack and stroke. We do need to reduce smoking rates further in society. We've made great progress. We've made great strides. I mean, the smoking ban that in indoor establishments, which came in, probably about 15 years ago now. I mean, at the time, that was very controversial, but I don't think anybody thinks it wasn't a success. I don't think anybody realistically thinks we should reverse that now. But we do need to do more to stamp out smoking in society.
You know, Jonathan, you're right. I'm not going to dwell on this. We have other things to talk about. But, when I was a teenager and into my 20s, I worked in a bar and it was everybody smoked. I'm not a smoker, never have smoked, but I might as well have done because the stench of cigarettes on my clothing, you just had to wash your clothing.
I don't miss those days at all.
Well, exactly. But I remember thinking, I was quite liberal about it. And I thought, well, if people want to smoke, let them smoke, whatever it is. But obviously the argument's moved on. Jonathan, I want to talk about long-term sick, and that's what you want to talk about as well, because a lot of those people could have found themselves with smoking related or cancerous issues or whatever, for whatever reason. I mean, I've had 4 months off sick this week, and it was to feel worthless, to sit there. There are only so many box sets you can watch. You feel useless. It's not good for you mentally. Things aren't obviously good physically as a result. But you're trying to get in and say, look, here is a resource, actually, we have in the country. We can help these people and we can help the country. Tell us more.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, isn't it totally demoralising to be not in work when you know that you can make a contribution? And what I'm proposing today are new measures, new reforms, new thinking to support people who say they want to return to work. Now, in this country, we've got 1 million people looking for work who want a job, and we've got hundreds of thousands of people who are currently designated as long-term sick, but say they would want to work if given the right support. And of course, we've got 1 million vacancies in the economy as well. So I'm proposing measures like giving more employment support at a local level and looking at some of the ways in which the benefit system works, which for some people who are on sickness-related benefits, it actually acts as a disincentive now to move into work because it's too much of a risk. And I think there are proposals, there are changes that we can introduce which will help more people go to work. Now, of course, I just want to say there will be some of the viewers who can't work. And for people who can't work, then of course we should guarantee security and inclusion. But for people who want to work, we should reform the system to give them the help that they deserve.
Long-term sick. I mean, it's really interesting to see that coming out of the pandemic, the UK is the only country in the G7 to see a substantial rise in economic activity, the so-called Great Resignation, with people just deciding they don't want to go back into the workplace. But this is a huge problem for whoever ends up running the country over the next decade, because a lot of people, the experts say, just haven't calculated how much they're going to need in their pension pot as people live longer and the cost of living rises. People may not actually be making a good economic decision.
That's absolutely right. So we've got increasing numbers of over 50s who have left work. Some of that is for early retirement. Some of it's because of ill health. Some of it's because they're caring for a partner or perhaps even a mum or dad who maybe has had a stroke or perhaps sadly has developed dementia and they need to care for them. But they say, look, if I could find the right work options, if I could find a flexible work option, I might go back to work. So we should put reforms into the system to help them find flexible work. But people also should get advice as well, because you've got some people who think, you know what, I've got some savings, I can access some pension, I feel comfortable taking early retirement. That might be the right choice when you're in your 50s. But if you're going to live another 30 or 40 years, you need to make sure you've taken advice, that you've done the calculations, that you've got the income for the next 30 or 40 years. So we need to make sure people have got access to proper advice as well.
It's not just about people and the conditions they have, it's about the attitude and the flexibility of employers as well, Jonathan. I mean, how do you get them to say taking on someone who is long-term, have a long-term condition, is a good idea?
I mean, that's really important. I mean, I was at a charity in Grays in Thurrock yesterday who help disabled people move into the workplace, and they work with employers as well to promote the benefits of having a disabled person or somebody with long-term health conditions in working in the workplace. So we've got to work with employers as well to promote the benefits of having a more diverse workforce, whether that is older workers. I mean, one of the things in which we've got to do is champion older workers. So often you get studies which show that employers can sometimes show a bias against older workers. You know, you get these examples where if you send in CVs for an interview and you put the date of birth on, the older workers sometimes don't get an interview. But if you don't put the date of birth on, the same person with the same CV does get the interview. So you've got to encourage employers to celebrate the value, the skills and abilities and talents of older workers as well.
Jonathan Ainsworth, thank you very much indeed. Jonathan Ainsworth, they're pledging new reforms to help people return to work if you are long-term sick. He is the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for braving the elements today.
Right, stay with us. We're going to have more for you.
I just want to say, if you're sitting there and you're watching us today and you are long-term sick and you've got the same routine to look forward to today, it's so demoralising. You look at that weather today, it's dull, it's dank, it's wet, whatever, and you're going to sit inside. I think that is an important thing, that motivation. Sometimes work is as important as medicine. Back after this.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dubry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dubry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Hopes for a breakthrough on NHS strikes as the government hints of a new pay offer.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock on the dot. It is Tuesday the 10th of January. Breakfast on GB News. You're very welcome with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Health Secretary is considering a pay offer to nurses that could see next week's strike action being avoided. The Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, told us everyone, including the government, wants to see strikes come to an end.
Everybody wants this to come to a conclusion. It's in the interest of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole.
Prince Harry's book, Spare, is released today. In a new interview in America to promote it, the Duke of Sussex said the late Queen was sad but not surprised by Megxit.
Britain's considering sending Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine. It's the first time a Western country's hinted it will send its own heavy armour to the conflict, and it could spur other countries on to do the same.
Disappointment for the first space launch from British soil. It failed to make orbit last night. The mission took off from Spaceport Cornwall, but suffered what has been called an anomaly.
Lots of you getting in touch on that very topic, actually. Della says the failed rocket launch just about sums up the state of the UK at the moment. Nothing works. Mick says, what viewers want to know about the failed rocket launch in Cornwall last night is, was the rocket with its satellites on board recovered? Or did the whole thing crash into the sea, gone forever?
No, I don't know where it is. Andy's in Cyprus. Andy, good morning, and good morning to anyone watching in Cyprus today. He's looking out his window. No sign of it there. But and thanks for your good wishes, Andy, as well. Daryl says, if it wasn't laughable, it would be sad. No wonder we are behind in the space race. We couldn't even launch a decent track and trace system during COVID. So, there you go. Nothing else to say. We're just saying we don't like where that sting is. It doesn't come at a nice point. It doesn't bend that. Lose that like Virgin Orbit. What's its name?
I don't know. Can't remember you were singing
I've just
it
noticed
yesterday.
3 times today we've run straight into that sting, so it's got to go.
Okay.
But that's got to move.
Yeah.
That's got to
All right.
move.
Look, our top story.
Yes. Sorry, I'm so sorry for embarrassing you that I'm off-piste and you sit...
Oh, no, it's all part of the fun. I never know where we're going, what we're doing, how long for. There's no discipline. I love it. But the Health Secretary is cracking whip, reportedly considering a new pay offer to nurses. This is an attempt to avoid strike action later on in the month.
OK, this could be a major shift in the government's position. The offer could take the form of a lump sum or backdated future pay.
It follows yesterday's talks between the government and health unions, which the Royal College of Nursing described as bitterly disappointing.
Well, earlier in the programme, the Business Secretary, Grant Shapps, told us the government are keen to find a solution.
It's in the interest of everybody, those who are striking, but obviously the country as a whole. And, you know, people like nurses do a terrific job and did through COVID, which is why they were the only ones to get a pay rise in the public sector last year with COVID. And we hope that we can find a way forward, a settlement. But today in Parliament behind us, I'll be introducing a minimum safety level, service level bill, which will sort of say, look, we will never withdraw the right to strike from people, but you know, when there are strikes on, life and limb must come first, and there has to be a minimum safety standard put in place for that.
We'll never withdraw your right to strike, but if you do, we'll cap your kneecaps or something like that.
Just bring us into line with France and Germany.
No, but it's
who love striking. The French are always on strike.
Typical sort of political speak, which is, we're not being tough, but we are, really. We are.
Well, let's get some analysis from Olivia Utley on this.
And this is my point about this. They need to find a solution to this. They need to get a deal with this. I mean, long term, if we're 2 years off a general election, this is a vote loser not to settle with the NHS, surely.
Well, it does seem as though we are close to breakthrough point. That's not quite how the unions are putting it, but it looks as though the government is essentially going to capitulate. What Steve Barclay seems on the verge of offering is some sort of deal to nurses, whether that would come in the form of a lump sum, so a hardship, one-off hardship payment, they're calling it, or else backdating next year's pay rise to include this year belatedly, something which they said was impossible before, but are now softening the tone on a little bit. It does sound as though there is going to be some movement there. As you say, that will probably help in an election, because what we've seen so far in the polls is that although support for strike action on the railways is sort of ebbing away a bit, support for the nurses and for NHS workers more generally is still very, very high. So yes, as you say, politically the government did need to soften their tone and strike some sort of deal with the unions, and it feels like that is something they're going to do. But on the other hand, obviously a Conservative government doesn't want to look as though it's sort of in the pocket of the unions or beholden to the unions at all, which is why we're hearing so much now about this anti-strike legislation, which is due to be tabled this afternoon. As Isabel said, it would essentially bring us into line with France and Germany. Grant Shapps is playing it down a bit this morning, saying he's hoping it wouldn't even have to be used. That said, it would be pretty seismic change to the law.
A deal. That's, look, you know, we're going to do this, but don't worry about it. Don't worry. Just have a deal. Now, if the government are looking at the polls and they're confident that the public have less sympathy for the postal workers or the rail unions or whatever, that means while the government concedes to the NHS because public support is behind the nurses, that means they've got a stronger hand, surely, with the train workers and the postal workers.
Yes, because the support isn't that strong for the train workers, it seems as though whatever deal that they end up striking with the rail unions will be possibly less generous than whatever they're agreeing with the nurses. And we saw that reflected in the language that the various unions were using yesterday. We had Sarah Gorton of Unison, which represents the majority, I think it is, of NHS workers, sounding very positive about the talks, whereas Mick Lynch and other union rail leaders were sounding a lot less positive. So we could see some movement on the NHS, but not on railways. The minimum service legislation would only count for essential services, so nurses and ambulance workers. But of course, it doesn't work for tomorrow when we're expecting to see ambulance strike again.
All right. Thank you very much, Olivia.
Cheers, Olivia. Thank you very much.
Now, Prince Harry's tell-all memoir Spare has finally been released with intimate details of his life and ongoing feud with his family, all included in its 416 pages.
Well, for details on the release and the consequences of it, our royal reporter Cameron Walker.
Several secrets spill off the pages of the 416-page memoir from the Duke of Sussex. Today, it's placed on British bookshelves for the first time. Prince Harry, in his own words, describing what it was like growing up in what he sees as Prince William's shadow. The broadsides and claims paint the tragic story of a man who ultimately blames the press for what he sees as their part in the death of his mother, Diana, Princess of Wales. In a promo interview, he branded the Queen Consort dangerous for forging connections with the British press to improve her image. In the book, Harry even accused his own brother, William, the heir, of physically attacking him. Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have not commented on Prince Harry's allegations. Friends of Prince William reportedly told the Sunday Times he's keeping a dignified silence for the sake of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales wants to keep the spotlight firmly on his charity work and avoid distracting headlines. And the late Queen's motto of never complain, never explain appears to be working for the firm. Prince Harry's popularity has sunk to a record low in the UK according to the latest YouGov poll, following his claims that the royal family briefed the press to make him and his wife Meghan look like villains. Prince Harry chose to include some deeply personal stories like how he lost his virginity, but touched on more serious topics, claiming he killed 25 Taliban fighters during his second tour of Afghanistan when he was serving as a British soldier. Several former soldiers are worried Prince Harry's claim will make him, his family, and the British Army more of a target for terrorism. The Prince also describes how he turns to drink and drugs to cope with his mental health struggles, and writes about a private conversation he once had with his father, now the King. Prince Harry says he wants reconciliation with his brother and father, whose coronation is just months away. But the rift runs deep in the House of Windsor, and it's understood both sides wants the other to accept some responsibility. Cameron Walker, GB News.
You know, we're talking about all of this now and the contemporary fallout from all of this, but of course historically in the 90s, we want to go to royal commentator Jenny Bond. She was there, she reported on all of this, she knew the origins of all of this as well. Jenny, good morning to you, and I'm just wondering what you've making. I'm just dying to know from your point of view, where do you begin with this? What do you make of what you've been reading and seeing?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good, Eamonn. Actually, I feel I'm on one of those wheels you give to your guinea pig that goes round, and we've just been going round and round for 30 years. But it's obviously extremely sensational. What I didn't get from the book is concrete examples of his allegations. I mean, he's absolutely got it in for the press. We know that. He feels he needs to reform the press. He's on a mission, a one-man mission to reform and change the press, root and branch. But I haven't got examples of these negative stories, which he says were planted with the tabloids and generally with the media at his expense. The only thing he could come up with in the interviews thus far was going back to the bridesmaid story. Who made who cry? Who cares? Anyway, I think it is short on that kind of detail to back up his allegations. Some of it's extremely poignant. Of course it is, about Diana's death and the trauma he suffered afterwards. And some of it is so petty and trivial that I hold my hands up in horror. I do not care that they had to shop at IKEA and found that demeaning. Really, I don't care.
Yeah, and I think you're right. You know, the way he's attacking the press, some people would say he seems to want to have some sort of dictatorial control of the narrative. And certainly, I think during those interviews with Tom Bradby and the American counterparts as well, you really got a sense that he didn't like being challenged. That this was someone that isn't used to being told no or being challenged. You know, when it came to the racism stuff, he was like, well, no, I never said that. What? Recollections may vary, but he wasn't having it. And he did appear quite testy at times.
Yeah, I know he was right in that, no, the word racism was not used. But my goodness me, he let his whole family in the UK, he let them be hung out to dry over that accusation of racism, which he says the press put out there. But, you know, if they didn't think it was racist, they should have said, no, that's not right. But they didn't do for the UK family what they felt should have been done for them, which was defend publicly. So there's a lot of anomalies in the book.
They accepted an award, the Ripple of Hope Award, for challenging structural racism within the royal family. They graciously accepted it with smiles on their faces.
That's absolutely true. And he also feels that if there were to be a reconciliation, which seems quite unlikely in the foreseeable future anyway, that the effect of the reconciliation between him and his family would ripple across the world. So we're going to have global peace and everyone's going to love one another. Maybe John Lennon's still around him. I don't know.
But look, where he is right, Jenny, is we go to we see how it translates. His attacks on the Queen Consort Camilla resulted in a headline today, Villain Camilla, front page of The Sun. But where he's right is that she did have a need to reinvent herself or to try and reconstruct her reputation in the eyes of the public. That bit is right. What do you then make of the further accusation that to do that, she basically was leaking stories about him and Meghan?
I wish he had some evidence of it, because in my experience of dealing with Camilla over the years, that is so at variance with the woman I know a little bit. I mean, I said this yesterday, I tried to get to know Camilla. I knew Harry's mother, Diana. I wrote to Diana, said, hey, can we chat? And she invited me to the palace. We got to know one another. I wrote to Camilla and she said, I'm so sorry, I have no interest in cultivating a special relationship with any journalist. And that was that. She shut me down. So where he's getting this from, I really don't know. And also, he's tone deaf on Camilla as well, because he said in that interview with Tom Bradby that his remarks about Camilla were not scathing. Well, you know, I think opinions as well as recollections may vary on that.
Just to back up what you're saying as well today, the royal editor Katie Nicholl, who we interviewed earlier, said exactly the same as you, that she had absolutely no evidence that Camilla wanted to form a special relationship, or ever did she hear of any bad-mouthing of Harry.
Quid pro quo. Nothing of sort of, I'll give you this if you give me that.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Mm.
I do wonder if there's one thing that the palace could do, which is issue that report into allegations that Meghan bullied her staff. Now, either it's true that she did, or she has been vindicated. And I think the result of that, the transparency of putting that out in the open, would be illuminating. Perhaps they're trying to protect her, or perhaps they're trying to protect themselves. I have no idea, but I think that could be a key, perhaps, to who's mostly right and who's mostly wrong in this long saga.
Jenny, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate. Lovely talking to you. Royal commentator Jenny Bond. She was there. She did it. She got the T-shirt during just all of the times when these things were happening. Indeed. So good to hear from her. But as for the book itself, it's gone on sale today.
Yes, it has. £28. Extraordinary price. Well, our reporter Ellie Costello managed to speak to the very first person who bought the book in person at Waterstones in central London earlier this morning.
I didn't expect me to be on my own. I thought there'd be a long queue. I'm quite surprised, to be honest with you. I thought there'd be a lot more people. I'm saddened about that, to be honest.
And what made you want to buy the books? There's been so many leaks, hasn't there? There's been so much in the press.
I don't know. I just want to read about him. I've not turned up here to be the first in the queue to be, hey, I've done it. No, I was hoping there'd be a lot more people to share my, comments with, and there's no one to talk to.
And what's your first impression of the book?
Well, I like the picture, to be honest. I thought the picture's quite nice. It's well done. And I've heard the interviews. I can't wait for the audio book. I've bought that already, and I can't wait to read about his family.
OK. We're going to get more public reaction now to the book release. Our South East of England reporter Ray Addison is in Sussex, because obviously we're talking about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex here. And so you're in Horsham, yeah? So what's the reaction, Ray, been there?
Yeah, good morning to you both and welcome to a rather rainy Horsham High Street, where I'm stood outside one of the only bookstores here, in fact the only bookstore that's stocking Spare for its release. And I was speaking earlier to a member of staff here, and they're saying that they're not bothering to do a big window display for Spare because there's been so much pre-publicity, they really don't need to go to that level of effort. Everybody's heard that it's out. And of course we found out way back in July of 2021 that the book was going to be released, and there's been so much speculation ever since that date about how candid Harry would choose to be. Ever since it was released, came out early by accident in Spain last week, we've had some answers to those questions, arguments between the brothers, how they both pled with their father, now the king, not to marry Camilla, now the Queen Consort, and of course Harry's time in the military as well, and how he killed 25 members of the Taliban. There's been pushback from interviewers about whether he had the right to share those stories, and he says, "I own my words." Well, earlier on I spoke to people here in Horsham to find out if they planned to buy the book.
I actually have kind of really been on their side. I've been fighting their cause for a while, but I do feel it's just so much media attention that it's kind of off-putting.
Not interested, I have to say. A little bit hypocritical of him saying about not wanting to, share information, and then we have it all.
Yeah, I'll probably buy the audio book and just listen to his point of view, really.
I don't know, I just think sometimes he doesn't realise how much privilege he has, especially now, people who have so little privilege.
I'll probably buy it for entertainment purposes and read it just to have a good laugh.
Well, as you can see there, a real reaction, a mix of reactions from people. Some people feeling he has every right to share his stories, other people saying he's being too candid, and some saying, well, hold on, your story's not that unique in the sense that all families have arguments. We know he's had a reported advance of around 17 million, 1.5 of that going to charity. Only time will tell if it was worth it.
Hey, Ray, thank you very much indeed. We will take a break, and then after that we're chatting to strictly professional Giovanni Pernici, who is sharing his top tips on staying healthy during the colder months.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel,
And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Now, this year's shaping up to become the year of well-being as more of us are taking steps to boost health. I am one of them.
Yeah, what's your tip? Yours is getting back to work.
Well, I recommended you magnesium lotion.
Oh, that's to
last
make me
night,
sleep,
to
so I
make you
can't
sleep. Vitamin D
I
tablets.
love a bit of.
well.
I'm a committed vitamin D taker. I like laughter. That's why I like hanging out with you.
Laughter.
Good for the soul.
Well, I'm deadly
you make
serious.
me laugh all day long,
I don't
whether
mean to make you
intentionally
laugh.
or not. It doesn't matter.
I mean to be deadly
You're
serious.
ridiculous.
I went through a whole interview today calling a guest by the wrong name.
Yeah, that's entertaining. We're not going to do that now. We have Strictly Professional Giovanni Panici here to tell us how he boosts his immune system and stays healthy whilst leading
Giovanni,
a busy and
buongiorno.
active life.
Buongiorno, come stai? How are you?
Very good. Well, tell me this. Have you already danced this morning? Have you, like, when you get up and you talk about keeping fit and keeping yourself active and whatever it is, when you brush your teeth or when, I was going to say shave, but obviously you don't shave unless it's your armpits or something. But do you have routines like that you get your body to, just start jigging about?
But that's what you have to do. When you wake up in the morning, you have to get moving. It's the most important thing to do. And a little bit of stretch, a little bit of tango when you do, when you brush your teeth. I mean, small things like this really can help to improve your immune system, really.
It's so interesting because a lot of the best things in life are free, and a lot of popular immunity hacks I was reading here in the press release includes having more sex, listening to uplifting music, taking vitamin D, fasting and gargling salt water. Not sure which of those is most appealing.
Oh, I stopped at the first one. I thought that was a very good idea.
Yeah, you do love it.
Sorry, that was just a conversation stopper. But listen, what is your favourite way to sort of boost your immunity? Because all of us, I guess, post-COVID as well, all very aware of bugs and trying to stay fit and healthy.
I think obviously, in my case, obviously dancing is one of the most important thing. Keep you, as I said before, keep your body moving, but as well, a good night's sleep can help, and obviously stay hydrated is very important as well. So all these things really can help to stay fit in a sense.
But Giovanna, how do you're a man, you perform, you're at theatres, you're at dance classes, you're on tour quite a lot. All that hotel life and that travelling and motorway service stations and whatever, how do you keep an active or a good immune system, a good gut health?
Well, obviously, as I said before, what you have to really try to do, it's from the moment you wake up in the morning, you have to move, because it really helps to improve your immune system. And then obviously, if there's a time you go to the gym, food is very important as well. So as you said, being on tour is quite difficult, but if you get structure, if you do a routine for yourself, that definitely helps.
And look, we're almost out of time, but I have to ask you before we let you go, Giovanni and Rose, we loved watching you. What's next for you guys? Will we see? Are you still in touch? Will we see more of you?
We're definitely still in touch, of course. Rose is busy doing a play, and I went to watch. It's absolutely hilarious. She's incredible in it. And I'm on tour myself. So when we're going to see each other again, we'll dance again. But we are really, really good friends, so...
Okay, you keep your immune system working, you keep your gut health good. Throughout my convalescence, I was recommended cold baths.
Oh, no, thank you.
Ice baths, but I've yet to be convinced on that one. I think the benefits would be outweighed by the...
I recommend an Actimel.
An Actimel, yeah. I reckon the ice bath...
helps.
The downside might be the heart attack.
Of the ice bath?
Yeah, so I mightn't do that. Giovanni, we say bye-bye to you. Thank you very much indeed. Stay well, my friend. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel and I will be back tomorrow to do it all again from 6 a.m. I hope you can join us.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great